If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Your return going to look like?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I mean, we are positive. We've been positive, but I feel I need to caveat that. We do think at the overall level the gains will be modest. That for U.S. and European equities, we're looking at kind of mid to high single digit type of returns for the S&P 500 for Europe. My colleague Mike Wilson has a 3350 target for the S&P 500 by the middle of next year. So it's still positive. It's still higher. It's still better than cash. In credit, we see kind of modest spread tightening. I agree with the earlier comment. We think volatility can probably fall a reasonable amount here over the next 12 months. But I do think, you could potentially see the bigger movement won't be at the headline equity market level. It would be at more of these rotations under the surface as some more of the traditional early cycle things do better.
Andrew, what we're seeing in the economy quite clearly are serious upside surprises, but there is evidence of scarring. There's reason to worry. Yet at the same time, I wonder whether this continued positive forward momentum, whether that is sufficient to continue the durable rotation that you're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's a great question and something where I think we might know the case this month. A big part of our positive economic view, specifically in the U.S., is the expectation that Congress will pass another round of stimulus, will extend the CARES Act. And that's very important, we think, for supporting the consumer, reducing the severity of that scarring that you mentioned. But there's a certain irony here where there's a risk that if there's a perception that the data is improving very quickly, maybe that reduces the impetus on the government to act, which would in the long term be, we think, the worst scenario, which would increase the risk that the recovery is slower and more prolonged. So one of the reasons we're positive is we do think that stimulus passes, but if it doesn't, that would be a severe risk to our scenario.
Andrew Sheets and Morgan Stanley. Andrew, always great to catch up with you and the team. Been great to hear you challenge the less constructive view in this market over the last several months. Andrew Sheets there joining us from Morgan Stanley. Tom Keene, it all comes back to one thing this month, doesn't it? The next move down in Washington on the fiscal side.
Well, yeah, that's really emphasized over the weekend. I'm really beginning to see, Joachim Fels mentioned this with PIMCO the other day. John, trillion used to be a thing out there. And as of about Thursday or Friday last week, even before the jobs report, trillion is the number everybody seems to be working on. And John, you know how an election year is. Just possibly the politicians will get feverish, and just possibly 1 trillion will become 1.2 or 1.4 or 1.6 trillion. That's what happens.
Maybe a visit back to the home states is the medicine that some of the politicians need down in Washington, D.C., Tom Keene. Looking at your equity market right now, up 35 on the S&P 500. We advanced a little more than 1 percentage point. Coming up later, as New York City enters a new phase of reopening, we'll catch up with Kathy Hochul, New York's Lieutenant Governor. That comes up later this hour. From New York City, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. Florida health officials remain on high alert as COVID-19 cases continue to climb. There are now over 200,000 confirmed cases in the state, 10,000 in one day alone. Officials say the hard-hit Houston area needs more restrictions, but Harris County Chief Lena Hidalgo says the state government has blocked local officials from acting to limit the spread of the virus. Hidalgo says the order by Governor Greg Abbott last week to wear face coverings helps, but it does not go far enough.
As long as we're doing as little as possible and hoping for the best, we're always going to be chasing this thing. We're always going to be behind, and the virus will always outrun us.
The virus hit a record for hospitalizations over the weekend in the South. In New York City, Phase 3 reopening resumes today from the virus. There is renewed efforts from some NFL fans to change the controversial name of the Washington Redskins. Julian Brave Noisecat says Native American activist groups say the name change is long overdue.
The case to be made here that is really clear is firstly that if a group of people are speaking out about the racism of a team logo, it's quite the thing to go and claim that actually no, you are honoring them. And it's hard for me to imagine the same thing happening for another racial group in the United States.
There is also a push to change the name of baseball's Cleveland Indians. The Mona Lisa is getting her groove back. Paris's Louvre Museum, which houses the world's most famous portrait, reopened today after a 4-month controversial lockdown. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
What's the true value of your custodial relationship? Ben Harrison of BNY Mellon's Pershing explains.
As sophisticated investors demand more from their advisors, advisory firms, in turn, need to rely on their custodian to help them grow their complex businesses. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, supporting the rapid growth of RIAs is our #1 priority. We understand what it means to deliver true value to our clients who are looking for a custodian that is aligned with their best interest and delivers high-value solutions, all in an open architecture environment with flexibility, choice, and transparency. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength, resiliency, and high-touch service that BNY Mellon Pershing provides. When you work with Pershing, we put your business first. Can your custodian say that?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467.
I'm moving up my stop on profit for euro at 113. So placing stop on profit for euro at 113.
And phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
At Simply Be, we've stepped up our sales so that you can step out in style. With up to 80% off summer clothing, you'll find some seriously must-have fashion at prices that are simply too good to miss. So go on, skip those weekend queues and treat yourself to something gorgeous. Shop the sale at simplybe.co.uk.
Honda. We're not a car company. We're more of a listening company. And now our ears have brought our attention to where people feel most comfortable. The lounge. So we asked ourselves, what could Honda do to innovate in this space? Well, how about more space? Calm and uncluttered, with modern yet retro styling, and built-in screens compatible with your games console. It's the most comfortable lounge you've ever driven. Introducing the new Honda E, our small electric city car. Honda. The power of dreams.
Everything's on the table, or many things are on the table. It's just a question of shaping it and do it smart. I thought the original rescue package was very smart. I don't know if everything has to apply all over again. We'll see. We assess the economy. That's the key point.
Larry Kudlow, National Economic Council Director, speaking to us in the last week or so after a blowout payrolls report and a big upside surprise once again. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Brambitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro, counting you down to the opening bell around about 2 hours and 12 minutes away, with equity futures up 36 on the S&P, up a little more than 1 percentage point after a weekly rally last week of around about 4%. We add some weight to it this Monday morning. In the Treasury market, 10-year yields have been really sticky, up around about 3 basis points last week, up about 2 basis points this morning, but still south of 0.7%. And elsewhere in foreign exchange, just to round things out for you, Tom, this Monday morning, the dollar weaker against everything in G10. Your euro stronger, advancing about 0.6%.
And we really haven't seen the dollar break down yet, John. If the dollar can break DXY 96, if we can break under that, that would be a big deal. We're not there yet. As John mentioned earlier, folks, there's this thing. You're in Washington, and then you have to go home to the constituents within an election year. That's happening right now. Kevin Surley is our chief Washington and chief constituent correspondent. Kevin, in the battleground states, Republicans and Democrats have to go home. What do they go home to?
An economy that's in shambles, really, and trying to really sort out whether or not there's going to be the type of stepped-up recovery that's going to allow for not just employees of big businesses, but Main Street businesses, small businesses, to get back to work, not just restaurants, but also all different type of cross-sector industries, widget companies, supply chain companies. Look, I think that's why the debate, and you heard that from Jonathan's interview with Larry Kudlow on Friday, that's why there's this reopened debate, Tom, about there being another round of economic stimulus. I'm told by one Republican lawmaker it's a matter of when, not if.
Okay, great. And this weekend, folks, I sort of got codified $1 trillion, which in a $17-18 trillion economy is not all that much. Are we going to get into a bidding war where we get that up, Kevin, well out over $1.4 trillion?
Yeah, I think the price tag is something that behind the scenes Republicans are uncomfortable with, especially when they're talking about things like extending unemployment benefits. I also think that if you look at some of the other manufacturing industry, rather, Tom, I think that could potentially see there to be more pressure on there to be some type of bailout. And then, look even further beyond that to see whether or not there's going to be any momentum for the infrastructure plan come the fall. You've got a new head of Amtrak, and I think that really could be driving force. He has a great relationship with Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chao. So all of those pieces of the puzzle are working behind the scenes to come together.
Kevin, there's a big question about the type of stimulus or bailout we're going to get, given the fact that we're unlikely going to get some sort of mass shutdown akin to what we saw earlier in the year. Right now, we're dealing with a depressed economy as people are fearful of going out, as local regions locally shut down restaurants and other places in order to control the virus. How will this bailout or stimulus be different? With that in mind, people are still social distancing and yet also hurting with a lack of a job.
Well, Lisa, I mean, to be quite frank with you, it's the timing of a potential second shutdown in the fall that has lawmakers incredibly uneasy. Let's think here, because cases are upticking in parts of the country. You mentioned some of the economic as well as the psychological anxiety as a result of the economy, as a result of the virus. But if this thing comes back and hits America in the fall, whether it's a second strain ahead of a vaccination that is a mass vaccination through the private sector, then really that could pose significant trouble and risk. So I think policymakers on both sides of the aisle are really trying to figure out the timing here in order to figure out when another round of stimulus would be the most effective.
Kevin, Bloomberg Surveillance spoke with Ambassador Bolton the other day. He followed it on with Face the Nation and Margaret Brennan over the weekend. And he stunned me when he said he totally agreed with Susan Rice, the Democrat, the Obama NSA.
Moving my stop on profit for euro to 113.05. So stop on profit to 113.05.
She get the nod?
Look, I think that I was talking to some sources over the last couple of days in Democratic circles, and many of them would argue that her supporters, she represents the type of experience, the type of commander-in-chief experience that is needed to take on the vice presidential role. Her detractors would argue that an alliance with Bolton, or not even an alliance, but the praise from Bolton could be a political liability. And he told you guys that as well after he made that very interesting remark. I think some other names on the potential short list, of course, are Senator Kamala Harris and Congresswoman Val Demings. Val Demings is someone who got earlier in her career was a community chief police officer. So she has the background of the police community as well, which could be interesting given the current dynamics of the country.
Hey, Kevin, great to catch up with you. Kevin Cerulli there down in Washington, D.C. Tom Keene, I'm not sure what a John Bolton endorsement is worth to either Democrats or Republicans at the moment, given the book that he's put out in the last couple of weeks.
I believe the number I saw was 700,000 copies. I know, John, you read it cover to cover this weekend. At least I got out to page 500. I know you're way ahead of me, out to page 600 as well. It's interesting, John. You know, it's a silly season, but it's a broken season. We're not looking to the conventions. We're not looking out to August and the conventions. There's something very, very different this time around.
And we still need some unity down in Washington to get another fiscal bill passed, Lisa. And the only place that there seems to be consensus in the administration right now is to not extend the enhanced unemployment benefits. And arguably for many people, that's really helped to offset the income shock and support the bounce back in the economic data that we've seen in America in a significant way in the last couple of months.
And supported the equity rally, a lot of people would say. This has been baked in, if you speak to a lot of Wall Street analysts, in equity valuations. This would be a huge game changer if all of a sudden that income padding that has really supported consumer spending or kept it afloat goes away. John, you've raised this point before. We have two issues here. There's the economic issue and there's the health issue. And we're not necessarily hearing a coherent strategy on how we are going to tackle the spreading virus throughout the country. When we talk about President Trump's support levels, in polls, it shows that in states where the virus cases are going up the fastest, which are red states, his approval rating is going down significantly. I'm looking for a more coherent strategy on that front, as well as some sort of stimulus or bailout plan and a timeline for when they plan to get that through, John.
On the fiscal package, it's not a matter of when they will. It's not a matter of size. It'll be big. It's a matter of composition and what will be in this fiscal package and what this administration will support. That will be where the debate will be in the next several weeks and the next several months maybe as well. From New York City this morning, good morning. Up later, Kathy Hochul of New York. Up next, Catherine Mann of Citi. From New York City, equity futures up 34, positive 1.1%. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that washing machine can handle all that laundry. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The equity market rally going global this Monday morning, surging in China, positive follow-through to the US session as well. From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide, live on Bloomberg TV and radio, alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro, 2 hours away from the cash open this Monday morning, with equities elevated up 35, call it 36 points on the S&P 500. We advanced a little more than 1 full percentage point. Elsewhere in the bond market, Treasury yields bleed just a little bit higher, up 2 basis points on a 10-year to 0.69%, still south of 70 basis points on a 10-year maturity. And Tom Keene, just to round things out quickly, looking at foreign exchange, the dollar weaker against the bulk of G10, the euro advancing 0.6%. Later this morning, 9:45, PMIs in America, a final read for the month of June. And then, Tom, a little bit later, we'll be getting the ISM at 10 Eastern, the non-manufacturing ISM coming up a little bit later this morning.
Right. Yeah, the economic data here I think is going to be really interesting, John. But, you know, to the Goldman Sachs essay over the weekend of moving out, it seems to me like third quarter sort of got out to fourth quarter. Right now, we're going to speak on finance and economics and reframe for the rest of this year. We can do that with Catherine Mann of Citigroup. But far more importantly, and John Farrell, folks, has been really out front on focusing on China-U.S. I think he's almost got the advantage being from England and that he can look at China-U.S. with a different prism. Dr. Mann has led with our analysis of the international economics and codependency of Beijing and Washington, and I must start there this morning. Dr. Mann, give us an update on the codependency that we see right now between Beijing and Washington.
Well, Tom, it's great to be with you again. The codependency seems to have taken a bit of a turn to the negative. We had thought that the relationship as of January was one that was a tentative truce. But of course, things have deteriorated since then, not only because of all of the issues with regard to the disease, but also because there's some lack of ability on the part of China to really buy all the things that the U.S. would like to sell. I mean, we've been talking and calling this a shopping list for quite some time, since back last year. And when we look at the items on the shopping list that the U.S. would like China to buy, the ag is there, the energy is there, but some of the other products they're just not going to be able to buy. And there's certainly a sense in which they're not going to be able to buy in bulk in order to reach those targets by the time it matters, which is later on this year, but not the end of the year.
Dr. Mann, the heart of your research this weekend goes to the heart of microeconomics and macroeconomics as it's taught, which is finance is an afterthought. You note the booming financial economy is compared to the economic economy, which is grim, grim, grim. How do we bring the two together?
Well, this has been a conundrum and really a puzzle, even for my financial market folks, particularly those in the equity markets, who have been arguing that the earnings per share that's consistent with the economic data is quite a bit different than what we see the market pricing in now. There are a couple of theories that kind of would make this apparent levitation of the financial markets make sense. One of them is that, everybody's looking through 2020 to 2021. And the error of that, I think, is individually a stock analyst can say, well, my stock is saying they're going to be lean, they're going to cut in order to maintain earnings going into 2021. But, if everybody cuts, your cut is my revenue. So it doesn't add up macroeconomically. And that's where the puzzle really comes in terms of the market. What this implies is that a lot of looking below the index at the individual stocks, this is what finance people ought to be doing at this point.
And Catherine, for economists, we've got to look below the headline economic figures as well. The aggregate numbers paint a constructive picture of a really nice bounce. Beneath the surface, this comes from Bank of America over the weekend. There were 12.4 million people who flowed into the labor market, hired, 7.5 million people who flowed out, separations. Catherine, you look at the same numbers, the same data. How are we meant to digest churn that big?
Well, we are in unprecedented times in terms of, the numbers. Churn has always been big. This, of course, puts it in a completely different category. What I think is a concern is that, in some sense, there was a sector of the economy, the leisure and hospitality, many of whom the workers were completely out of work because of the way that was shut down. But there's this second shoe to drop, which is, as I say, thinking about how are firms planning on weathering the next half of year in order to survive into 2021. They're going to do that by cutting. And they're looking now at how am I going to do that? And that's where we get a lot of the separations from. It's a different category of workers than those who are coming in from leisure and hospitality. I also think that, in keeping with what we were talking about before, the levitation of the stock market indexes in general is, of course, looking below that to what the Federal Reserve is doing. We cannot talk about the strength of the financial markets in absence of talking about the extent to which the central bank is on a supportive track.
The next phase, forward guidance seemingly for the Federal Reserve, Catherine. How do you think that will take shape in the coming months, the coming meetings?
Well, this is a real challenge because, of course, true forward guidance is where you talk about it. That has the appropriate effect so that you don't actually have to do anything. So true forward guidance is one where the Fed says, I stand behind you, but then the market takes on its own dynamic in order to make things appropriate again. This time, the market has taken off a little bit too much, in part because it's not just forward guidance that the Federal Reserve has provided, it's actual implementation of all of those programs that they've put into place. Now, back in March, that was the appropriate thing, forward guidance, putting in the programs in place, being ready in case, there was another real, collapse in the markets. But unfortunately, what we have right now is a replay of what I wrote about last year, which is the central bank dilemma. Yes, they want to prevent a fire sale situation, where the financial system cascades into a second GFC 2.0. On the other hand, how much do they want to contribute to moral hazard, which is things are, as I say, levitated. And so any kind of decline from where we are now really puts the central bank into a dilemma situation. How much do they really want to support the existing level?
Catherine, how much at this point are Fed policies actually bringing jobs back or providing a supportive environment to allow job growth going forward?
Well, that's always the relationship between central bank actions and actions in the real economy have a lot of different links in the chain. And what I can say right now is that the dynamics of some of the fiscal programs, the PPP, of which there is also, of course, the Main Street lending in the U.S. that matters. But we have done some work that looks at things like possible downgrades from investment grade into high yield, and then from high yield into default. And we have worked with our analysts in those two categories of asset classes and evaluated what are the employment effects of a downgrade on the investment grade or a default out of high yield. And what we found is that, those are pretty big numbers, especially on the high yield going into default, have pretty significant implications for employment. So there is a rationale for the Fed to be in a supportive mode to try to avoid having fallen angels. As you know, those are investment grade that turn into high yield, and they had a particular date put on them for the Federal Reserve programs, and then the cash availability and the liquidity to try to tide over on the high yield. But of course, underlying this, it's got to be the real economy that performs. Otherwise, none of these companies are going to be able to make it through to 2021.
Your projection is that markets, or Citi's projection is that markets will catch up to the economic reality, which is bleaker than stocks and corporate bonds are portraying. Is the sense here that the solvency issues will overwhelm the liquidity solution that the Federal Reserve has presented the market?
Well, the problem here is that, liquidity is important, but solvency depends on the return of the real economy to a pre-COVID situation. And we don't have that we have several different scenarios for the U.S. economy. And under a very optimistic scenario, the U.S. returns to pre-COVID level of GDP in the middle of next year. But that still represents an entire year where firms are not generating revenue along the path that they had expected. Now, some of them have replaced that by borrowing and issuing equity and issuing bonds, just from amazing issuance, historic issuance, in order to give them their own liquidity in order to tide them over. But even then, if we don't, there's still a whole year where there's no new revenue generation, and of course, no one has a return to 3.5% unemployment. So, that argument that by next year everything will be okay is really optimistic, really optimistic.
Catherine, really appreciate and enjoy your insight, especially this morning. Catherine Mann there of Citi. Tom, what Catherine's talking about is absolutely critical for the future of this economy. In an economic downturn, the number one thing a large multinational company with a big, strong balance sheet does is retain optionality, draw down credit lines, get that access to capital, and then wait, and then wait, and then wait, and then work out what the new economy looks like. And Catherine, the likes of Mohammed Al-Arian, all looking at the same thing now. These large companies thinking about right-sizing for the new economy and a downturn, an episode that's going to be with us for a long time.
John, you're too young to remember this, but D is the symbol, and that is Dominion of Virginia, and that used to be the mother of all retiree utilities. Safe, safe, safe. That drifted away in distraction, and what we see with Mr. Buffett taking out the Dominion nat gas product is Dominion going back to that multinational safety, that caution forward. I'm just as interested, John, in if Mr. Buffett gets all that big money that's out there to get going. I really wonder if this is the advent of an M&A activity by the people with cash up to their eyelids.
The deal drought ends over at Berkshire Hathaway, a theme of this program for this morning. From New York this morning, good morning to you all. We advance about 35 points on the S&P 500, up by 1.1%. Up next, New York continuing to reopen, but without in-restaurant dining. Up next, Kathy Hochul, the New York State Lieutenant Governor, right here on Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Michael Barr. Good morning,
Tom,
Michael.
thank you very much. Thank you very much, sir. At least 24 people were shot in Atlanta over the 4th of July holiday weekend. 4 of them died, including an 8-year-old girl who was riding in a car with her mother and an adult friend near the scene of the burned-out Wendy's where police killed a black man. Atlanta's Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms had strong emotional words.
We're fighting the enemy within when we are shooting each other up on our streets in the city, and you shot and killed a baby.
Other shooting deaths took place in Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York City. There's a lot of soul-searching going on inside Facebook and inside its largest corporate advertisers. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
We're heading into a second week of over 500 companies boycotting Facebook to put it into taking a stronger stand against hate speech. So the question is real. Who needs whom more? Facebook has become a major advertising vehicle, and for Facebook, nobody wants to lose income, but some Citi investment research shows that if the pause lasts a month, the stock will lose $1 per share. CEO Mark Zuckerberg has agreed to meet with them and civil rights groups this week, so we may know more in a few days. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. NASCAR fans are cheering the organization's support of the Black Lives Matter movement and the ban on Confederate flags. That's the takeaway from an audience study by Performance Research, a Rhode Island-based firm that specializes in market and sponsorship analysis in the wake of driver Bubba Wallace's decision to call for a ban on the Confederate flag at NASCAR events. UConn women's basketball coach Gino Auriemma is asking for help from Congress to get foreign students, including athletes, back to campus. The Huskies have 3 foreign players on their roster this year. They are from Poland, Croatia, and Canada. The start of the outdoor motocross season is being delayed for a second time due to a spike in coronavirus cases. MX Sports Pro Racing has opted to postpone the start of the outdoor season until August. That series had been scheduled to start July 18th in Indiana. And that's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellet.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that vacuum can take care of your well-trodden home. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions, decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Normally, I'd be recording this in a fancy sound studio with a mocha-frocka skinny latte. Instead, I'm in my bathroom. Technology means I can wander around my house reading this script, and people can take a wander around yours with Purple Brick's virtual viewings, or they can safely view it in person if you prefer.
Do you want a cup of tea, love?
Can I get a mocha-frocka skinny latte?
Beg your pardon?
Tea's fine, thank you. Book your free valuation with Purple Bricks.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
Sole use of masks is not enough. It has to be accompanied with a hand hygiene. It has to be accompanied with a physical distancing. It has to be accompanied by appropriate behavior for people who have symptoms.
Tarek Jasarevic, the spokesperson for the World Health Organization, on the use of masks and more, as the administration here in the United States makes a real shift over the last week on wearing masks in public. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene, together with Lisa Bravitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro. With equity markets up 4% last week, we add some weight to it this Monday morning, up a little more than 1 percentage point on the S&P 500. Risk on worldwide. In the bond market, that means yields are up by a couple of basis points. Your 10-year maturity to 0.69%. Last week, dollar weakness. The week before that, a little bit of dollar weakness with the emphasis on little. This morning, a little bit more. Euro stronger. Euro dollar up 0.6%. Tom, the dollar weaker against the bulk of the majors this morning.
Watching dollar weaker, stronger here into the end of June, and watching it weaker the last number of days, John, bears careful consideration if we see a break under 96 on that blended DXY index. We welcome all of you on our simulcast, Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, worldwide, Bloomberg 1130 in New York City, and, of course, across the Empire State. We have been thrilled that the Lieutenant Governor could come in week after week after week and give our national audience perspective on the success New York State is having on lessening of cases of the virus and much lower deaths of the virus as well. Kathy Hochul joins us this morning, the Lieutenant Governor. Kathy, I need you to give me an update on what everyone wants to know. If New York is responsible, unlike other states, when do we get the restaurants open?
Well, thank you for having me back on the show again and allowing me to have this conversation with you, because it's so important people understand where our minds are, what the governor is thinking about, what our administration is thinking about when we make determinations on whether or not a region can go into the next phase. So first of all, New York City is now in phase 3. There was no pause. No one said you can't go into phase 3. So personal services are still allowed. A lot of the hair salons have been open, but they can do more services, tattoo parlors. I mean, there's just a lot of things that had been shut down in the past that now can be open, massage salons, etc. However, the reason there is a delay in the allowance of indoor dining is that, first of all, we have seen an incredible spike in cases nationwide. We are also concerned about local enforcement to make sure that that is going to go in a very robust fashion in order to ensure compliance. And thirdly, personal compliance. I mean, you don't have to go very far to see constant social media pictures of people in New York City not adhering to what we've asked them to do. Now, the majority, I would say, are doing well, but it doesn't take but a small minority of people to flagrantly violate the rules to shut us down again. So that is why we are not going into phase 3 element respect to indoor dining. We've allowed the expansion of outdoor dining, and we continue to encourage people to support their restaurants so they can hang on by ordering takeout. But we don't have to answer your question, Tom, it is just not safe to say that the usually smaller restaurants in New York City, they're very intimate, and with the indoor circulation of air, which is now becoming a more well-known phenomenon, what this is doing to the spread of the COVID pandemic and COVID virus, we can't take that risk. We are where we are in New York State because we are risk averse, and we're not going to do that.
Well, that's the point. I mean, you go right to it. We're risk averse and we're looking for perfection. That folds right over into the school year as well. It's July, and we're getting into July to you and all the other governors of our great 50 states, the District of Columbia and of Guam. Are we going to get a school in September?
Well, I don't think being risk averse when you're in a global pandemic is a problem. I mean, we're not striving for perfection. We're striving to save lives. And we are going to continue monitoring the data as it unfolds. I mean, we think about the fact that back in March, no one was even talking about wearing a mask. Everyone thought if you washed your hands, you're going to be okay. Now we are understanding just very recently that this is more airborne than we had thought, and the droplets can linger in the air for a longer period of time. So we have to have the benefit of the ability to turn on a dime, to say what we thought was right based on global experts, and New York State is being advised by global experts, not just the CDC, who are always having to question the motivation there from the president's influence. We want to trust, but we also have to verify. We want to make sure we get it right with respect to restaurants and particularly with respect to schools. This is not an area we're going to make a mistake with the health and well-being of New York children. And we only wish that the rest of the nation had followed our lead in taking extremely serious this pandemic and taking precautionary measures and enforcing the social distancing, wearing the mask, shutting down, but now coming back in a way that's thoughtful and based on the data, not just the emotion that we all want to get back to normal and back to school. We can't possibly say in July what this pandemic, the landscape is going to look like when children should be starting school in September. We're planning for it, but we're not going to guarantee it at this point.
Lieutenant Governor, so important to be cautious and to care for people's health. There's also a question of how long this state and New York City in particular can last financially as things do not get back to normal and as people who have left the region stay away as things don't return to normal. And frankly, as people are worried about cuts to basic services, whether it's police or sanitation, where are we on that front?
There is a very simple solution. And that is that the federal government, the president, has to recognize that this is not a state phenomenon. This is not one hurricane that hits New York City. It is a hurricane that has hit the entire nation. And if they don't realize this by now, that this is beyond the borders of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, that the rest of the nation is being hit hard, and I only need to name a few states like Texas, Arizona, and Florida, and you know what I'm talking about, that we need the federal government to get back to business. Congress, the House has been on our side. We need the Senate and the President to sign a very, very robust, large, and impactful stimulus plan to help support our local governments so we can help the states, help the local governments, so we can fund the very essential services you're referring to, police, healthcare workers, teachers, and not miss a beat. And if they do what they're supposed to do, we can. It'll help our recovery. And I've said on your show before, there is no recovery for this nation without the recovery of New York State. We are the epicenter. We beat it back. We've contained the beast. We are the role model for the rest of the nation. But we want to start jump-starting our economy. And we know how to do it. We need help from the federal government.
Lieutenant Governor, the debate of this month, that's for sure, and maybe beyond. We appreciate your continued engagement with this program. Tom Keene, I want to talk about one industry, one sector of this economy that just has not been given a chance. And I've lived it. I've watched restaurants fail. Usually it's brutal, it's slow, then it happens all at once. But you always have that last Saturday service to try and survive. For a lot of these restaurants, they just haven't had that last chance. And that's going to be one sector of this economy that we need to work out, Tom, what on earth to do to help them.
Well, I'm out there on the street trying to do it. I mean, everybody's dining out in the streets, and folks, I mean out on the street. But you know, John, at the margin, that's not going to help. We have to figure out a way to do this, and as the Lieutenant Governor said, against a risk-averse reality.
And right now, we haven't figured it out. From New York City this morning, good morning. Equities up 38. We advanced 1.2% of the S&P.
Business. Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that fridge can hold enough for your hungry household. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
I'm moving up my stop and profit for euro to 113.10. So stop and profit for euro 113.10.
You would be able to name more people nostalgically than currently? This doesn't
Come on,
you're
crazy.
I know.
On their podcast, Puck Soup, NHL analyst Greg Wyshynski, Sean McAdoo, and Ryan Lambert chase the conversational biscuit up and down the ice, skating between serious discussion on what's happening in pro hockey to irreverent opinions on movies, fast food, and life in general. Search Puck Soup on TuneIn to listen.
Wondering what to play next? Want to know what other TuneIn listeners are listening to right now? Head to the trending section under Browse to explore the most popular stations and podcasts on TuneIn today. Millions of listeners like you can't be wrong.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Ready for some straight talk on what's happening in the MLB? On the Barstool Sports Podcast starting 9, Dallas Braden and Jared Carrabis cut through the BS to break down the league the way they really see it.
Yeah, we're continuing our little mini-series of college baseball coaches in addition to bringing you major league players from throughout the league. If you've been listening to Starting 9 for some time now, you know that we've had a big leaguer on every single episode for probably 2 years now.
Search Starting 9 on TuneIn to listen.
Are you fully informed on the NBA? On the NBA Hangtime podcast, veteran sports writers Sekou Smith and John Schumann analyze the latest NBA news, storylines, and discussions with guests from around the basketball universe.
Isaiah Thomas joined us here on the Hangtime podcast. Isaiah, good morning.
Everybody's doing well. As you know, my daughter tested positive.
Search NBA Hangtime on TuneIn to listen.
Right the first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Kind of permanent job destruction, it takes years to come back from. And we're just now getting a sense of how much permanent damage has been done to the economy.
You have a Fed that has literally looked into a television camera and said, we're just printing the money.
It's not about the discussion about whether there's going to be a recovery or not. Let's not confuse bounce with recovery.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Good morning, everyone. Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keith. Thrilled you're with us. Bloomberg Surveillance on radio, on television as well. Lots of good conversation. We've already had some great conversations this morning. We drive that forward in this hour, and then out to John Farrell's The Open at 9. I'll be with Paul Sweeney on radio at 9. We're really going to focus there on the Dominion Warren Buffett transaction, which I find absolutely fascinating. But within all of this is a lift to the market and all of that because the government has the back of the financial system. John Farrell, without question, the dominant feature right now is the certitude of $1 trillion here or $1 trillion there to buoy the economy up here into the end of the year.
Yeah, and Tom, maybe another trillion this month as well, in the month of July. Just a huge debate taking place in Washington. And I repeat what I said a little bit earlier on the program, Tom. It's not a matter of when. They will do this. It's not a matter of how big. It will be large. It's a matter of the composition, the shape of this. What they agree on at the moment is not to extend the enhanced unemployment benefits. And I imagine there's going to be some pushback against that down in Washington in the next several weeks.
Futures up 38, Dow futures up 374, so a real lift to the market. All of this, Lisa, has as a backdrop the pandemic. It's really a mixed picture. There's no question about that. I mean, just speaking to the Lieutenant Governor of New York, things are pretty calm in New York State, even in New Jersey. But for the rest of the country, there's some real challenges out there.
That's exactly where I wanted to go. The idea that we got a record number of cases in the United States over the weekend on a daily count. You see the cases in the Sun Belt absolutely surging. And this raises a question, going to John's point about that stimulus bill that will get passed. It will be big. It just depends on the composition. And it goes to Catherine Mann's point over at Citi. This question about, companies have liquidity. People have cash in their balance sheets. But you have a situation where who's going to go out and spend if people are worried about getting sick, which is increasingly the reality, even in the summer months. The fall will get worse, John.
And of course, no question about it. We've seen here. I'm Tom. He's John, Lisa, and we've seen here as well.
I know you guys are getting
folks,
matching tattoos this weekend.
I got mine. I forgot to tell the Lieutenant Governor I love New York. It looks really quite good on my arm. It goes next to my Tottenham tattoo as well, my Tots tattoo, John. It's a Spurs tattoo. It's before they lost. Moving on.
Please carry on. Keep digging.
Let's go to the news. Thank you. Our first word news in New York. Here's Ritika Gupta. Ritika? Oh, let me go. I'm sorry. I was thinking, that was my fault, folks. I'm thinking the way we do things at 6 o'clock versus the way we do things now. Right now, we're going to bring in Alicia Levine. She is wonderful, just wonderful on the equity markets and really a more holistic view of what to do for it. Alicia, you have been absolutely wonderful at BNY Mellon on the idea of staying in the market nervous. How do you accomplish that to the end of the year?
Good morning. Great show, guys. Great to see you as always. Yes. Staying in the market nervous, and that is still our message. It's extraordinary. I think we're all scratching our heads, but the market is telling you you've got to be in it. And I listen to the asset classes, and that's what they're telling us. So,
Alicia, something you've said over the last couple of weeks, and I think is really important, not about the pace of the recovery, just about the direction. And I think that's something a lot of people have failed to appreciate. The direction of travel has meant a whole lot to this market. It means a whole lot to you too, doesn't it?
That's right. So the thing is, we think that this summer could be a bit of a test and some consolidation and choppy, and that not least of which is that the third quarter tends to be the worst performing quarter historically. So when you add that with some of the news items that you three have been talking about, you could get that here. However, the direction of travel is upward overall. And I don't think you should be shaken out here. And you can hedge and you can change your sectors that you're interested in. There are many sectors that simply have not participated yet. But the direction of travel for the economy is upward. Even if shallower than we hoped 2 weeks ago, still upward.
The consensus view is that this is the bounce, then the recovery starts to slow in late summer. And I keep going back to this question, Alicia, whether anemic growth in the future is sufficient to carry on driving equity gains. Do you think it is?
So I think we have to separate what the support for the markets and economy are versus what the fundamentals of the corporate sector are. And in the end, the overwhelming amount of stimulus coming from the Fed and from Congress, and we do have the fiscal cliff. As you said, we do expect something will be passed. And by the way, because the resurgence in cases is happening in the South, I expect that that next stimulus bill to be larger than $1 trillion because it's going to hit home for many more people in the Senate. And I think it's going to be larger. And there's an understanding that what's kept the economy going are the transfer payments from the government to households that have been out of work and have been affected by this and will be longer. So we think we're going to get that. And the Fed is out there having every single asset class supported. So with that, even if it's anemic growth, markets will be supported.
Markets will be supported. There is a question of what companies will do with the fact that balance sheets on the consumer side are strong and their own balance sheets are flooded with cash. We saw Warren Buffett take a stab over the weekend, and then this morning, Uber is said to be agreeing to buy Postmates for $2.65 billion. Uber shares up nearly 8% ahead of the open. How much will consolidation, as Tom was asking about earlier, how much will that consolidation really be the hallmark of the months to come as companies look for any advantage from an economies of scale perspective in this economy?
Look, I think you will see a lot more M&A here simply because the primary funding markets are open and cash is available, and there are going to be winners and losers. And this is the kind of economy and market where relative strength will matter more than if you have a decently growing economy. And so I think you will see more M&A, and that is positive for the market. I think the Berkshire Hathaway news over the weekend, also very positive. I think that's part of the reason you're seeing the futures up this morning. That's simply Buffett's back in, and if Buffett's back in, it can't be that bad.
When you said you were looking at your outlook and you said the economy of 2030 was brought forward 10 years, what does that mean in terms of where you want to invest?
So what that means is the structural changes that we've all been aware of, whether it's retail or tech or 5G, you know, the kinds of consumer behaviors that were slowly happening, that were visible and creating some shakeouts, now have been turbocharged. So whatever you thought the economy was going to look like in 2030, we're getting it now, and we're getting it next year. So it means that certain softline retail is probably going to struggle very sharply, and you've already seen it. Certain kinds of businesses simply cannot survive this going forward. Consumer behavior will not change entirely, but it will on the margins, and that's where you're going to see problems. I think the healthcare sector is a huge place to invest here. You will see so much money and investment coming both at biotech and large cap pharma and tech to deal with some of these, some of the data issues that you need to get healthcare right. That's all going to be accelerated.
Alicia, will corporate behavior change? And is the thing that we're missing here is we're going to see an M&A boom like we've never, ever experienced before?
So this is the interesting question, and I think this is where politics comes in a little bit. I think you will see an M&A boom. There's not a lot of time left to get these deals done before the election. So I think, you know, left to their own, that you will see a boom. I think there has to be some eye to what the regulatory picture is going to look like after November and whether certain tie-ups will be viable or not. But everything else being equal, you should see an M&A boom here. Yes, cash is plentiful.
Alicia Levine, love getting you on the program. Great to catch up on this equity market. Thanks for your time this morning. Tom Keene, Alicia was a little bit diplomatic and delicate there, but I think the point she was trying to make, and forgive me if I'm wrong, Alicia, but the point she was trying to make, Tom, is that come November, there might be a new administration that maybe is not likely to allow some of the big M&A that we've seen over the last couple of years.
There's no question about that. And, you know, that's part of the reason I'm moving that question forward. And, of course, it works off this $9.7 billion transaction of Mr. Buffett this morning. John, I'll agree with that. You get out front of political change if it comes. But I think a shift has occurred, John, just in the last 3 days here, back towards where Mr. Trump has a viable pathway to an election if he chooses.
What was it about the shift in the last week or so, Tom, that you think is so important right now?
I think that the Democrats are a little bit in chaos. A lot of this will be clarified with Vice President Biden's vice presidential pick. We talked to Greg Valliere about that earlier, and you know, I think it's really front and center, particularly with the goofy summer we have. It's a conventionless election, which is remarkable.
Yeah, when he starts to face a real campaign, maybe that's where he starts to face some real difficulties in that campaign for him. Hasn't really started in the traditional sense. Maybe it won't either, Tom. I don't know. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all. Alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Abramowitz, I'm Jonathan Ferro with your equity market pushing higher on the S&P 500. We're up nicely by 38 points on the S&P to kick off the week. A 4% rally last week. We add some weight to that this morning, up by 1.23% on the S&P 500. Coming up a little bit later on the economy, Ethan Harris of Bank of America, as we await the PMIs a little bit later this morning, and the non-manufacturing ISM coming up at 10 a.m. Eastern. From New York, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now with the latest news from New York City and around the world, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, thank you very much. The number of COVID-19 cases in the U.S. continues to rise. 37 states are reporting increases. Texas hit a record number of hospitalizations this past weekend. In Houston, Texas Medical Center reports the ICU capacity is at 98%. In Florida, one of the nation's newest COVID-19 hotspots, there are now over 200,000 confirmed cases, 10,000 in one day alone. The state is now accounting for 20% of new cases in the entire country. Starting today, tattoo parlors and other personal care businesses like nail salons will be allowed to welcome customers in New York City as it enters phase 3 of reopening. Officials decided to hold off on allowing indoor dining indefinitely out of concerns that it would cause a spike in coronavirus cases. It was a violent holiday weekend in several major U.S. cities. While fireworks were going off in the skies over the city, Atlanta police were busy investigating multiple shooting calls, which left an 8-year-old girl dead and people wounded all over parts of the city. Atlanta police say 23 people were shot and wounded over the long holiday weekend. Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms.
The reality is this: these aren't police officers shooting people on the streets of Atlanta. These are members of the community shooting each other. And in this case, it is the worst possible outcome. And there were 2 other people who were actually shot and killed last night and several others. Enough is enough.
Shooting deaths were also reported in Chicago, New York City, and in Washington, D.C. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Influential.
Give yourself a Diet Coke break.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Can you leave it round the back, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Kill. Oh, yeah. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
In the United States, we spend $3 trillion now. Okay, that's good. In order to keep that level of stimulus up next year, you have to not only replace the $3 trillion that you did this year, but you have to add another $3 trillion on top of that. So I think that there's a reality check here that in order to keep the public sector pushing the economy forward, there has to be more and more amounts of money, and I just don't know if it's financeable.
Carl Weinberg there of High Frequency Economics on Bloomberg Surveillance earlier this morning. We'll face another test on what's financeable and what isn't a little bit later this month, maybe later into the summer when Washington makes another push for another fiscal package. From New York City this morning, good morning to you all alongside Tom Keene and Lisa Bramwitz. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. In your equity market this morning, we are up around about 39, call it 40 points higher on the S&P 500, up by 1.25%. The message from Alicia Levine I thought was pretty plain and clear. If Buffett's back in, Tom, then it can't be that bad.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm frankly in that camp that when Mr. Buffett acts, that gives a general lift, a positive construction to the day forward. No question about that. The best article over the weekend, without question, on the virus was from the wonderful William Booth of the Washington Post, writing on the science of vaccines, not the hot air, not the political debate, but actual scientists sitting in microbiology labs and virology labs working. We've made every effort at Bloomberg Surveillance to speak to these experts. Peter Hotez of Baylor was in the article, and of course in the article was Deborah Fuller. She's at the University of Washington. They are definitive in microbiology, and she's truly one of the world's experts in how you test vaccines, how you do it in people, how you do it in primates. Deborah Fuller joins us now. Dr. Fuller, we're to the testing season. Will this be a normal testing for vaccines, or will this time be different?
Yeah, this is a very different season for testing vaccines, as it's accelerated much quicker than what we've ever seen any vaccines tested before. Most vaccines would take between 5 to 7 years to go through clinical trials, and what we're looking at here is an accelerated timeline that is, 18 months to 2 years, so we can get these vaccines out to people as quickly as possible. So we're looking at some predictions that some of the earliest vaccines to be available and into the population as early as the late fall, this in 2020 and early into 2021.
You say there was no silver bullet. Do we assume that there'll be a vaccine and then booster shots or booster vaccines along the way?
Yeah. There's a number of vaccines being developed. I think greater than 150 different types of vaccines that are currently in various stages of the pipeline. Some already in clinical trials, some to enter clinical trials very soon. And there's a lot we don't know about this infection yet. We don't really know what kinds of immune responses we really need for protection. There was recent studies to suggest there's not just antibody, but potentially T-cell responses might play an important role in protection against the virus. So as these different vaccines begin to roll out, we start to, see how well they work. Some vaccines may not work as well, for example, in the elderly. It's particularly notable that most vaccines don't work as well in older people. And yet, we have a lot of different vaccine strategies still in the pipeline coming forward. And so you might see some vaccines work better in the young, some better in the elderly, some might be cheaper to produce, some might be able to be manufactured at, higher numbers of doses. So you're going to see a lot of different sorts of vaccines that roll out, and the first ones that come out, they may not be the best ones that we have. And so as we begin to see additional ones, we might see, populations taking booster immunizations that raise their immunity and sustain their protection from the infection.
Dr. Fuller, de facto, there is an experimental nature about all of this, just because this virus is so new and this is such an accelerated time frame to get a vaccine going. A lot of Americans will not get vaccinated, even if it is available, this according to a number of polls. How concerned are you about that and the public relations push around that to convince Americans that this is safe?
Yeah. There is quite an accelerated timeline, but one of the things to keep in mind is that, for all of these clinical trials, they are still checking all the boxes for safety. They are overlapping their clinical trial timelines, but they're not really skipping any of the safety criteria that's typically required to release a vaccine into the population. So if we have some vaccines first available, say in late fall, it's important to note that that's not going to be available to, 5 billion people in the world. They're going to roll those out in, hundreds of millions of doses available for certain populations. And those will be available primarily probably for, healthcare workers, people at high risk, say in areas where there's a lot of infection going on, first responders and the like. And that's going to actually have quite an important impact in helping to slow and moderate the pandemic, even as we're starting to scale up and bring on additional vaccines that will eventually be able to, be offered more globally to the population.
Doctor, on the outside looking in, it seems like, A, there is a tremendous amount of confidence that we can develop a vaccine, and B, we can do it a whole lot more quickly than we typically would take. I just wonder, from your position, take us in your world, what underpins the confidence that we can do this on a much tighter time frame?
Yeah, we, as scientists, we work quite a bit in what we call preclinical studies in the laboratory, where we investigate, whether or not the immune responses induced by a vaccine are able to actually neutralize the virus. Are they able to actually protect animals from an infection? And we've seen a lot of promising data along those lines to indicate that the vaccines are inducing the kinds of immune responses that we would expect to provide protection. With that said, we won't know for sure until it's actually being, in efficacy trials, in those phase 3 clinical trials where it's going in tens of thousands of people, and you're comparing people who get the vaccine to people who don't get a placebo as to whether or not it's truly efficacious. And, as I mentioned, we don't know until we actually, see human trials whether or not antibody responses, which is the primary immune response we're targeting with our vaccines, are really going to be sufficient to provide protection. Some of the other unknowns is how durable is that antibody going to be. If you're going to vaccinate a population, you can't just have antibody, around for 30 days and expect that's going to protect. It's going to have to be sustained at least for 6 months through a season. So there's a lot of unknowns still yet.
A tremendous amount of unknowns. We remain hopeful. Deborah, we appreciate your time this morning. Hopefully you can come back soon and keep us up to date on everything. Deborah Fuller there, microbiology professor with the University of Washington School of Medicine. We cannot fully normalize this economy until we get a handle on this pandemic. That is the view of many economists, including Ethan Harris of Bank of America. He joins this program next. In your equity market, up 41 on the S&P. We advance 1.3% and add some weight to the rally last week. It is a global equity market rally, and one that the Chinese media fully endorses overnight, with the Shanghai Composite delivering a major gain. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com. Download the app and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Oculomotor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
The equity market rally goes global this Monday morning. Good morning to you all. This is Bloomberg Surveillance live on Bloomberg TV and radio alongside Tom Keane, together with Lisa Bravitz. I'm Jonathan Ferro. 60 minutes away from your opening bell with equity futures up 41 on the S&P. A rally that started in Asia, China. The Shanghai Composite up 5.7% at the close. The biggest one-day gain going back to 2015. And a reminder of that bubblicious episode around that period several years ago over in China. In the bond market, treasuries head south, yields head north, up 2 basis points on a 10-year to just south of 0.7%, 69 basis points on a 10-year maturity. That is your yield at the moment. And ahead of the economic data later this morning in America, 1 hour 15 minutes away from the final PMIs, and then at 10 a.m. Eastern, a non-manufacturing ISM in America. Your dollar is weaker, Tom. Your euro is stronger.
Right now, John, let's pick up on what we've learned since the jobs report. Of course, your interview with Mr. Kudlow as well, and then some thinking over the weekend about where are we. I know John wants to talk about the dynamics with our next guest, Ethan Harris, with Bank of America. Dr. Harris leading a really sophisticated economic coverage at the bank. Dr. Harris, let me get sophisticated for you. What's the difference between a furlough and a layoff? Any idea?
Yeah. A furlough is what happens before you get laid off permanently. No,
thank you.
Yeah, that was a cruel comment. No, I mean, the furlough is where you explicitly expect the job to come back, and layoff is more of I would view it as a more likely that the job doesn't come back. What's obviously happening now is that whereas at the beginning of the crisis, most of the people who are laid off expected to be rehired because they hoped the virus would calm down. Now the layoffs are more permanent. This is now companies saying, you know what, the economy's picking up, but I'm going to do layoffs anyways. So it has shifted to something that feels more like a more permanence to it.
And John, to me, this is amazing, and this is the real mystery forward into July. The July report will get the first week of August, and maybe we get to Labor Day, John, and we have some understanding of these dynamics.
Tom, this is why the churn beneath the surface is so important. We focus every single month on that Friday. This time it was a Thursday on the net change. But Ethan, I know you guys and the team over at Bank of America, you're all looking at that churn beneath the surface. What does it speak to?
Well, I mean, you just have crazy cross currents in the job market, which is one reason why the forecasts are so bad. I mean, you've had massive layoffs. Companies have now brought back about a third of the people that they fired in March and April. So we're moving very quickly in the right direction, at least in May and June. But on the other side of the equation, you have the ongoing new layoffs. And as we move forward, those easy rehirings start to fade a bit, and we focus much more on the new layoffs. And that's where the real concern is.
Are you seeing early signs of scarring already then, Ethan?
Yeah, I think that we need to remember that this economy and this story is moving at 1,000 miles an hour. And a payroll report on data that a survey was done early June is now almost a month old. And what we're looking at in terms of the weekly indicators is, they kind of stalling out, that the claims numbers remain very high. Surveys are starting to turn a bit. The daily stuff and the weekly stuff we look at that gauges the measures in re-engagement in the economy start to flatten out. It does feel like, what was a very positive V story in May and June is now turning L, and that's a real concern.
Let's talk about one aspect of scarring that we're seeing, and that is that wages are starting to decline more significantly, a sign that perhaps some of the lower paid individuals are getting rehired in sectors that have been shut down, and higher paid individuals are getting laid off as companies reassess the landscape going forward. How much are you expecting that disinflationary trend in wages to continue through the rest of this year?
Well, I think in the short run, there's a lot of distortions in the data like everything else right now. So when you lay off a low-wage person, average wages go up because you have fewer people. When you rehire that person, average wages go down again. So that firing and rehiring of those low-wage workers has caused some big upward and then downward biases in the statistics. I think if you step behind the scenes and think about the underlying process here, though, we're definitely in a period of slower wage growth going forward. The unemployment rate is much too high to sustain wages at this level. But again, I wouldn't take literally the recent data. It's going to be a gradual disinflation process going forward.
Dr. Harris, can we afford a new $1 trillion stimulus?
We can. It's not great to be pounding out these massive budget deficits, but we have a lot of room to borrow. Capital markets have not penalized us at all for huge budget deficits. We know from the history Japan has even bigger debt than the U.S., and the markets continue to allow them to borrow. Of course, you're now creating a burden on future generations, which is not great. But if we're going to keep this recovery on track, we do need another $1 trillion. We can't go cold turkey on this stimulus right now. We need it badly.
What is the number that you see unemployment at next year? I mean, other houses are talking 9.2, 9.3, maybe 9.0. Should we be more optimistic and really breach the 9% level?
No, I think those numbers are about right in the ballpark we're in, a little below 10% at year end for the unemployment rate. We've made a little bit of progress, obviously, in the last couple months. But now we get the real test, and there's as with everything else in the economy right now, there's tremendous uncertainty. But one thing I think we can be confident about is we're not going back to normal this year. We're going to have a sustained high unemployment well into next year, and perhaps even beyond that.
Ethan, just on your forecast, I wonder what underpins them on the fiscal side at the moment. Is your base case that the enhanced unemployment benefits get extended? If they don't, do you have to change something? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we're assuming that we get a number of elements to the next package, that right now there's a lot of political posturing going on, but that ultimately, they do pass a big package that includes some further support for small businesses, that extends at least some of the unemployment benefits, that helps state and local governments. If we don't get that kind of $1 trillion type or $1.5 trillion type package, we're going to have to cut our forecast, because the economy's not ready to be taken off of the ventilator here. We're still hurting.
Yeah, and a lot of these small businesses are facing insolvency, and a lot of the bigger players are seeing an opportunity to pounce. We saw Uber consolidating, or said to be consolidating, with Postmates this morning, setting their shares up. Warren Buffett taking a move. What's the net effect on economic growth when you do get waves of consolidation like the one that is expected later this year?
Well, I think that this is something that I think is not fully appreciated by investors. I mean, right now the focus is all on the rehiring, the getting the economy back on its feet story, which I think is correct. I mean, we're seeing that. We had two very good months for the economy. But then as you go further forward and companies have to kind of deal with the new reality that we're not going back to fully normal, and then they make those very painful choices about cutting CapEx budgets and doing layoffs. And so there's a kind of a lagged headwind to the economy. This comes in every recession, by the way. Recessions can start from all kinds of different shocks. Sometimes it's the Fed, sometimes it's oil prices. This happens to be a health crisis shock. But in every recession, the original shock gets things going, but then there's secondary shocks as companies and individuals have to deal with the scars of the crisis. And so it's going to make it much harder to get back to full employment, these ongoing adjustments.
And Ethan, the scale of the debt, the bill on the other side of all of this, the deleveraging that you expect, just how big of an effort do you expect in the years to come on deleveraging, paring down the debt that's been accumulated through 2020?
Well, I don't think it'll be dramatic. I think that you're still going to be in an extremely low interest environment, and where you turn over debt at low service costs. So that kind of helps stretch out any need to refinance. And I don't believe arguments that say that, now we're going to have a big tax increases next year, particularly in the case of a Democrat sweep. I don't think that's true. I think that you'll get small tax increases under Democrat government, and likely little, if any, increase under Republican government. And, of course, if you get split government, you just get a freeze-up in activity. I don't think the politicians have the appetite to do big tax increases, and the markets aren't demanding it. The markets are saying you can keep borrowing at high rates, and the budget deficit will come down as the economy improves a bit. So I think that regardless of what happens in the election, the rise in taxes in the next couple of years is going to be small.
Ethan Harris of Bank of America. Ethan, fantastic to catch up with you, sir, to get your input this morning. Good morning to you and the whole of the team over at B of A. In your equity market this morning, up by 41 points on the S&P 500, advancing 1.3%. Tom Keene, it's one more conversation this morning that comes back to that one single thing again, the next fiscal move. And to Ethan's point, if he does not see what he expects down in Washington, those forecasts for economic growth through year end will get revised lower.
I agree, John, but the character of the pop this morning really speaks to me of an enthusiasm in this crisis of some form of business as usual. And to me, that is underscored by the Dominion Berkshire Hathaway transaction of what may come. I mean, John, think about it. If you're a CFO or an operator of private equity, you've got to make note of that transaction.
That's one piece of it this morning, Tom, lifting optimism. Lisa, we talked about it a couple of times over the last couple of hours. It's not just about money costing nothing. It's money earning nothing that is pushing people to make some questionable decisions.
Yeah, although Warren Buffett is known as behemoth in the investing world, there is a question, though, about how much conviction there is behind this rally at a time of such incredible economic and health uncertainty, John.
Equities up right now. We advance 41 points, up 1.3% on the S&P 500. From New York City, heard on Bloomberg Radio, seen on Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now let's see what else is going on around the world. Here with the latest headlines is Michael Barr. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Tom. An open letter by hundreds of scientists claim that the World Health Organization should revise its recommendations about the coronavirus and its airborne dangers. Dr. Ashish Jha is director of the Harvard Global Health Institute.
Look, we have a long way to go in this pandemic, and if we want our economy open, if we want our lives back, a fundamental part of that is going to be wearing masks. It feels to me like a pretty cheap and easy thing to do, and I don't know why we as a country haven't really made this a national goal. We really should.
37 states are reporting increases in COVID-19 cases. Austin Mayor Steve Adler says hospitals in the Texas capital are 10 days to 2 weeks away from being in trouble with coronavirus cases spiking statewide.
We're not at a place right now where we're overrun, but the numbers tell us that if our community will not change this trajectory, then we're hurting.
New York City officials kicked off phase 3 of reopening today, paving the way for legions of beauty businesses, nail salons, tanning studios, and tattoo parlors to open their doors to customers for the first time in months. Tributes have come pouring in for Broadway actor Nick Cordero, who died after a long battle against the coronavirus. The Tony-nominated actor specialized in playing tough guys on Broadway in such shows as A Bronx Tale and Bullets Over Broadway. Cordero was 41. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Concern about commercial real estate is intensifying.
In the city of Boston, we saw negative 1.5 million square feet of negative absorption this quarter.
Aaron Jodka, Managing Director for Research at Colliers International, says that is an extremely high rate of negative absorption.
That's the highest absolute number we've ever seen in the city. And it tops the fourth quarter of 2001, which is in the sort of aftermath of September 11th, the fallout from the tech bust. Now, the market's grown over that period of time, so if you're looking at it as a percentage of inventory, that 2001 period was more significant, but for an absolute number, this has been the big one.
And Jodka says the amount of square footage of real estate being subleased is also alarmingly high, but he hopes the office market can recover quickly as businesses open up again. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced influenced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Connecting decision makers.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and see if that vacuum can take care of your well-trodden home. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
People underestimate the fiscal stimulus is extraordinary. I mean, the amount that's going in, but married to monetary stimulus, this is a one-time increase to the money supply of extraordinary proportion.
BlackRock's Rick Reeder talking about the fiscal effort of the last several months and the fiscal effort still to come. A huge focus of this equity market this morning. Good morning to you all. We advanced 40 points on the S&P 500 futures, advancing 1.3%, 42 minutes away from the opening bell. Live on Bloomberg TV and on Bloomberg Radio. Tom Keene, I'll step away in just a moment to prepare for the open at the top of the hour. Erin Brown of PIMCO joining us at 9:30 Eastern on this equity market rally as it goes global in a big way.
Now, it's a big jump, and I want to make clear, folks, we've seen this through the morning, 20 up, 30 up, 40 now. You really wonder where we'll be here at 9:30. Right now, what we want to do, and we can do this with Michael McGlone, he's with Bloomberg Intelligence and does commodities, but far more than that, he's focused on the things you'd expect, gold. A little bit off the radar is what Mr. Buffett is focused on, which is natural gas, not oil, not West Texas, not Brent crude, but that cleaner fuel, natural gas, and of course that quixotic element of the last 30 years, LNG, liquefied natural gas, and that is a transaction for Dominion. Michael McGlone, nat gas we're basically giving away. What is the value for anyone of a distribution system of nat gas if the commodity is imploding in price?
Well, hey, thanks, Tom. One thing about natural gas, it's been precedent for deflationary trends and indication from commodity markets. So just a few weeks ago, U.S. traded natural gas, the global benchmark, reached a 25-year low. So that's been very good as a precursor for Fed easing and central bank easing. Yes, it's bouncing now, but the key thing is massive supply, and the supply is really coming from rapidly advancing technology in the U.S. Yes, there's LNG, but the U.S. is exporting that now, and the same thing in energy. It's just this massive increase in supply, and demand cannot keep up, despite the fact that, as we know, natural gas is one of the cleanest forms of energy.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Warren Buffett betting on natural gas at a time when the big companies, including Dominion Energy, which is selling these assets, the pipelines and storage facilities, are moving away from fossil fuels in general and are trying to plot a cleaner future. Does this sort of indicate that Warren Buffett or indicate that a lot of people are betting that the bet against fossil fuels has gone too far, too fast?
It might have, but there's a big two kind of different bets here. He's betting on the pipelines, and that makes sense because there's rapidly increasing demand for natural gas. People need the natural gas. The point is, from a producer standpoint, is there's just too much supply. So the actual price, I don't think it's going to affect the price at all. I look at the outlook for prices, it's still somewhat bearish. You don't want to get bearish at a 25-year low, but getting natural gas much above 2, which is like 180 now in the U.S., just doesn't have much of a chance. We have pretty loud, very large inventories and more supply coming on. And demand, yes, it's there, it's just not as much as it used to be.
Although you did have Warren Buffett also getting into Occidental, so there could perhaps be some sort of bet that some of these assets are undervalued. Where do you see the potential for upside in the fossil fuels industry at a time when most people are writing it off both from a lack of demand with the global economy standpoint as well as a shift toward a less carbon-heavy type of footprint?
Well, that's the key thing, I think, Lisa, and that is the decarbonization factor. So if you look at the outlook for actual energy prices, crude oil, the number one, near $40 in the U.S. is pretty expensive. Remember, last year was hovering around 50, and U.S. shale producers can start making money about 40. That 40 is the new 50. So there's going to be more supply coming on. So I look at it as it's being replaced by technology, decarbonization, demand's not there, it's incrementally declining, and then we have this global recession. So I view crude oil and even copper, they're getting expensive levels here in bear markets that have been in place for about a decade.
But, Michael, the heart of the matter is, and this is the cagey Warren Buffett, he's not buying shale fields in the Permian Basin. He's buying a distribution system. What is the economics of pipelines, of 7,000 plus miles of pipes? I mean, he's not going out and doing exploration. He's buying the distribution system, right?
Exactly, and you're not replacing the need for natural gas anytime soon. I think he sees that, knows that natural gas is the cleanest form of energy, and you need those pipelines. So I see that as that's an astute investment from his standpoint, and it doesn't matter the actual price, but from a pipeline standpoint, you need the pipeline.
All right. Well, since we have you, Mike, I know that you focus a lot on gold, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about it. We are seeing it surge to near record highs. How high are we going to see gold get going forward, given the degree of uncertainty in the bear market that we're seeing in commodities, as you just talked about?
Well, there you just described. Well, I help focus on gold as a commodity guy because it's one of the few commodities that's actually in an enduring bull market. So the key level everybody's kind of watching is this $1,900. That's the old high. I view gold as just a consolidating bull market. It's a matter of time to take that out, and it's in a bit of a perfect storm right now for higher prices. We have an election coming on, as Jonathan Farrell mentioned in an earlier place. Money earns nothing now, and gold is the counterpart. So I don't see gold doing anything but going higher. Very good supports around 1,600, and in the meantime, it's just going to knock around and drive people crazy and eventually just go higher. I don't see what's going to make it go lower, particularly as we enter into this contentious election.
Michael McGlone, thank you so much. With Bloomberg Intelligence there, a nice primer on natural gas and the distribution of the natural gas system, which is what Mr. Buffett was looking at with the Dominion acquisition. Again, that's $4 billion plus 5.7, 9.7 billion transaction. Lisa Bramlett, I'm looking at a market which is absolutely extraordinary. We need to go back to February and the pre-pandemic glow, and then the shock of it all. It's amazing to me, Lisa, over 3 or 4 weeks, how we plunged down, and I'm going to put a single point, March 23rd. And Lisa, I mean, we got to begin to frame what it's like to go up 50% off of a bottom. We're not there yet, but it's amazing how close we're getting.
This is the heads you win, tails you can't lose market. I mean, that seems to be what this is. Because we've got a virus count that is surging. We have a situation where the economy is limping along. Goldman Sachs downgrading its expectations for growth. And people are getting even more excited about stocks. And the reason why is because the Fed is guns a-blazing and the federal government is ready to act yet again with another stimulus. What can go wrong if you have all this liquidity?
Well, I'm glad you bring that up. The what you go wrong, and Ben Laidler nailed this at Tower Hudson this morning. Within the mix of the pandemic as the first order condition, folks, Mr. Laidler made very clear there is a fact right now of much more increasing cases and much fewer deaths as a general statement worldwide. And the big shift would be if we begin to see the deaths pick up as the cases have picked up. He's not predicting that, but he's noting that's been the glow here that's maybe allowed for the bull market to occur as he amply predicted. Let me do a data check right now. Futures up 41. That gets your attention. That level 3170. 3170. Dow 26,148. up 389 points. And the VIX comes in nicely, 27 high, almost 28. We've had a 26 print just momentarily earlier, 27.44. Lisa was quizzing Mike McGlone on gold, $17.95 the ounce. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who sees change.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts, here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
If you have to drive, then it's more important than ever to watch your speed. As London starts to reopen, there are going to be more people on our streets. There'll be more people cycling, more people walking to work or to the shops. If you must drive, avoid the morning and evening peaks when the roads will be busier. We want the streets to be safe for everyone, all the time. So watch your speed. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Heroes. They're the ones we look up to, or sometimes down at. If they're under your sink mending a broken pipe. From plumbing to plastering, heating to electrics. At Local Heroes, every job completed by an expert tradesperson comes with a 12-month British Gas guarantee when you pay online. So if it needs fixing, there's a local hero for that. To get a quote, search Local Heroes. Terms and conditions apply.
Where do hockey and pop culture coexist?
So let me get this straight. You would be able to name more people nostalgically than currently? This doesn't.
Come on.
You're crazy. I know.
On their podcast, Puck Soup, NHL analyst Greg Wyshynski, Sean McAdoo, and Ryan Lambert chase the conversational biscuit up and down the ice, skating between serious discussion on what's happening in pro hockey to irreverent opinions on movies, fast food, and life in general. Search Puck Soup on TuneIn to listen. Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business Radio.com and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Merger Monday is back with Warren Buffett putting some of his money to work in the natural gas space. And after the long holiday weekend, equity futures are pointing higher as investors shrug off sobering pandemic metrics in many parts of the country. The dollar is weaker this morning. Yields are up modestly, and gold, no surprise, is higher once again. Let's get some color on those equity futures. We welcome Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at this Monday morning?
Well, since you mentioned Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway, we might as well start there. The Class B shares, the ones in the S&P 500, are up 2.5% in early trading. Berkshire agreeing to buy gas pipeline and storage assets from Dominion Energy for $4 billion. Now, Dominion and Duke Energy at the same time canceled plans to build the Atlantic Coast natural gas pipeline, which would have crossed the Appalachian Trail. Dominion's down 2% in early trading, and Duke is lower by 3%. So that cancellation not going over well. Since you're talking deals, we've got to mention Uber Technologies, up 8.5%. Yep. The owner of food delivery service Uber Eats agreed to buy rival Postmates for stock valued at $2.65 billion. Now, this deal followed reports last week that the companies were in talks. And then there's Tesla. You know, the highest analyst estimate for the next 12 months had been $1,250 over at Wedbush, was raised last week. Tesla now trading at $1,277, and there's a new high in terms of analyst price targets. JMP Securities raising its projection for the next 12 months by 43% to $1,500.
They're all playing catch-up here.
Yeah, I tell you, it just can you top this? It seems like Tesla's up 6% in early trading. Gilead Sciences up 1.5%. The European Union is seeking to line up supplies of the drug maker's COVID-19 treatment remdesivir on behalf of 16 member countries. That's according to an official familiar with the matter. And Becton Dickinson's up 4%. The medical supplier won U.S. clearance to begin selling a COVID-19 test that gives results in 15 minutes. Now, the test works with a system that's already being used in more than 25,000 U.S. locations. Thermo Fisher Scientific up 2.5%. The lab equipment maker said second quarter revenue rose about 10%. Analysts were expecting sales to decline based on the average estimate in the Bloomberg survey. Crown Castle International up 5%. There's a company that owns cell phone towers.
Great business.
Yeah. Activist investor Elliott Management wants more money out of that business, higher dividends, among other things. They're making a public call for change at Crown Castle. Elliott said they've been talking to the company privately for more than a month. Something about an economic interest of more than $1 billion in the company. Square's up 4.5%. SunTrust raised its price estimate on the payment processor by 81% to $150, and that revised target is the highest among 35 analysts. SunTrust said Square's Cash App may eventually capture 20% of U.S. direct deposit accounts, so taking away business from banks. Freeport-McMoran's up 4.5%. The copper and gold producer's second quarter sales of both metals topped its forecast, and Freeport's preliminary adjusted loss was narrower than analysts expected. And one more for you, Paul. Harley-Davidson up 5.5%. The motorcycle maker received a buy rating and new coverage at Citigroup. The firm cited the potential for a turnaround under Jochen Zeitz, who became CEO in May.
Interesting. HOG, great stock symbol for Harley-Davidson there. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, the Supreme Court, we're in that time of year where they're issuing a lot of their rulings, and one ruling that came out recently was they allowed the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to continue operating. That's the good news, but said that the director of the consumer watchdog could be removed by the President of the United States, quote, at will. To get a sense of what that means for consumers and protection of consumers in the financial markets, we welcome Arthur Levitt, former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission and a Bloomberg LP board member. Arthur, thanks so much for joining us here. So as we think about this PB, what does this entity do, and has their authority been weakened at all?
Well, I think not. I think that the Supreme Court, in allowing the CFPB to continue operating, really established this consumer regulator in terms of its ultimate standing. What the Democrats did, however, they insulated it from political accountability with lots of layers of protection. The Bureau derives its funding upon request to the Federal Reserve, so Congress cannot use appropriations to rein it in. And secondly, Dodd-Frank also let the president remove the director who serves a 5-year term only for inefficiency, neglect, or malfeasance. So that makes the Democrats happy, since they believe they'll be able to replace Trump appointee Kathy Kraninger with a Warren protege if they win the White House in November.
Yeah, Arthur, that's what the New York Giants used when they let Eli Manning go. As a list of malfeasance was in there somewhere as well. Arthur, I've got to ask you about the uproar over Wirecard in auditing, and this goes back to Arthur Andersen and Enron a million years ago. This time it's EY, Ernst & Young. You and I know it as Ernst & Winnie, hugely venerable firm, Chairman Levitt. But the question here out of the FT this weekend is, are we going to force these guys, this industry, to separate auditing from the consulting that was invented, I'll say 20, 30 years ago? What are your thoughts on that? Do we need to finally make auditing pure as it used to be?
I wish we could. Lots of experts have called for that. It's not going to happen. It's too much part of the ingrained profit motive of the firms. They simply will not give up the consulting, which in just about every instance.
Well,
I think we
that auditing has taken a back seat.
I mean, a little difficulty there, Arthur. Let's continue the conversation. I mean, Arthur, but can't we set up some kind of Chinese wall like we have in investment banking and the distribution of securities?
I think that's been tried, and I don't believe there is a constitutional way of doing it.
I mean, Paul,
I
to
think
me,
it's both that and political.
Yeah, Paul, to me, this is a huge, huge deal. And I don't mean, folks, for those of you in accounting, I'm not trying to single out, the train wreck that Arthur Andersen was or what we've got with EY. But, Paul, it's sort of logical to make auditing separate. But as Mr. Levitt says, that's not the way it works out.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Arthur, I guess what I've observed from first of all, we've had a tremendous amount of consolidation in the auditing business. Tom and Arthur, we used to talk about the big 8 or the big 6, and I'm not sure what we're down to now, the big 4. But it seems like the auditing business often drives the consulting business. You establish a relationship through your auditing practice, and then you try to leverage that into higher margin consulting business. Is that kind of the business model that seems to be working for some of these big firms, Arthur?
Yes, it is. It certainly is. And the purity of the audit is distorted by the economics of the consulting business. Consulting is just far more profitable than auditing.
Arthur Levitt, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. The former chairman of the Securities Exchange Commission and a board member for Bloomberg LP. Folks, this is going to be something you're going to see a lot about. Wirecard. Hugh Von Steenis was just lights out today with UBS talking about European banking and the regulated and deregulated size as well. Right now, with our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. Coronavirus is skyrocketing in states such as Arizona and Florida. Jacksonville, Florida, where the president relocated the Republican National Convention, had the fastest growing rate of coronavirus of any metropolitan area in the U.S. for the week ending July 4th. That's according to Evercore ISI. The convention site was changed after Roy Cooper, the Democratic governor of North Carolina, balked at holding a gathering in Charlotte as planned since 2018, when it was the only city to officially submit a bid at full capacity. Authorities all over California tried to keep up with fireworks-related incidents over the weekend. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
With official firework displays canceled due to coronavirus, folks seem to take things into their own hands. Pictures from the LA area and the SF Bay Area show wall-to-wall, almost non-stop skylighting. LA firefighters say they responded to thousands of emergency calls, and also it caused fine particle air pollution to go crazy. In the north, some districts report having to resort to only calls for structure fires, leaving some grass fires to burn. San Francisco fire officials reported 110 fires on the 4th, and Oakland authorities say the area sounded like a huge bag of popcorn popping. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
In Texas, the remains of missing Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen were identified, according to her family, after being discovered near the base earlier this week. The investigation now is focusing on the primary suspect, a fellow Army soldier and his girlfriend. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Bloomberg. Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts from more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, folks, here with your M&A Monday. I mean, come on, we're not going to talk Uber, Postmates, Paul. That's unmanly. It's an all-stock deal.
Exactly.
Funding money and technology and all that. Let's talk a manly deal. Remember when Dominion is what your grandmother bought?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Dominion stocks and bonds and things like that. And now you got Warren Buffett in there. And, I was listening to your conversation the last hour with Mike McGlone from Bloomberg Intelligence, Tom, and, he was kind of highlighting that it's not necessarily a bull call for natural gas per se, but it's certainly a bullish call for distribution business, pipeline business.
Exactly.
Really smart analysis there.
7,770 miles of pipeline among some other hardware that Mr. Buffett. To me, it was a very comfortable Paul Buffett transaction, and that it's stuff.
It's stuff, right? It's stuff you understand. You don't need to explain the technology. It's a pipeline, and it transports natural gas.
For our listeners, Paul, and folks, I just can't say enough about Bloomberg Intelligence with Mr. Sweeney, invented with a little help from a guy named Secunda. But, Paul, I look at utilities, and they used to be real simple. Pay the electric bill, regulated, make 13%, great.
Yep.
And then they all went off and did stuff like this, nat gas, LNG harbors, all the other disasters. You and I know, I mentioned Enron earlier, which didn't work out. And I don't mean to make Dominion sound at all like Enron. Where are we now in the continuum? Are utilities still off doing stuff?
It sounds like they are, Tom. I mean, they're looking like everybody else. They're looking for return, and they're looking for yield, and and I think there's regulated and unregulated, and it's a complicated business.
What's the trend right now? Is it trend towards more cozy, comfy, regulated predictability, or is everybody still out looking for used car businesses or whatever?
Yeah, I think in this world we're in, Tom, it sounds like we're probably back to more of the the more tried and true kind of basic utility business that we all grew up with. But again, I think a lot of these companies are looking for yield. So, it's always interesting to see when somebody like Warren Buffett steps up and starts looking at that part of the business. And the nat gas market, as we know, Tom, has been, hard hit for a long time. Nat gas at kind of near all-time lows, as Mike McClellan was saying. So we'll pay attention to this deal. We always pay attention to Warren Buffett. This is Bloomberg.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon N.A. Member FDIC.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Influential conversations from...
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town, so come in and talk laptops and washing machines or fridges and TVs. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Decisions, decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash. And I'm Karen Moscow. Global stock markets starting the week higher after China's influential state media stoked bullish enthusiasm. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 38 points this morning. Dow futures up 370 and NASDAQ futures up 122. The DAX in Germany is up 1.6%. 10-year Treasury down 9/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.16%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.4% or 18 cents at $40.48 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1/3% or $5.90 at $17.95.80 an ounce. The euro 1.1330 against the dollar. British pound 1.2511 and the yen 107.51. Uber Technologies up more than 7% this morning after the company agreed to buy Postmates in a $2.65 billion all-stock deal. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keith Roger with us. Folks didn't know Uber is up 7%. That's why we love Karen Moscow doing those data checks. It is an America that is riveted by the ebb and flow, the dynamics of cases and deaths of this terrible pandemic. On this Monday, it is good to catch up with Joshua Sharfstein of the Johns Hopkins University.
Well, I think that was the reason why we've seen such high numbers, particularly in the South and the West in the United States. But I think, there's a little bit of a shock to the system happening right now, and I think people are getting worried again. So I think we're seeing, people pull back, bars close, even governors who are sort of dismissive now taking this very, very seriously. So hopefully that will, avert the worst kinds of disasters. I just don't know if it's going to be enough to really control the virus anytime soon.
Professor, when you look at, how it's ripping through some of the Southwest in the U.S., is it a little too late to do anything concrete about it or, to at least reduce the number of fatalities? Or can we really put a stop to it?
So it is possible to control. I mean, other countries have been able to control really, serious outbreaks like this, and it starts with, starting to shut down a little bit again, which is what's happening in some places. But then you're going to have to keep that in place for a while so that the virus just doesn't have the chance to keep moving around, and that's what's been really hard for the United States. As soon as you go back from the brink for like a day, people are like, how come we can't do this, and how come we can't do that? And then it's just going to be like a low boil for a long time if we can't really drive the infections down.
Josh, every day there's a different story. Today it is an actor. He is 41 years old, and he's had a terrible many months battle with COVID and died at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles yesterday. He was the incredibly gifted actor Nick Cordero. Great. There's a million Nick Corderos out there who aren't famous. Will you explain to our audience once more that the young are not immune to this virus?
His death really does put an exclamation point on that. I think he's 41 with a 1-year-old at home, and there are many people in that situation. And there's a lot we don't understand about the virus, and there's a lot that doctors who've taken care of patients with the virus say is very scary. And, it is still largely not understood, this disease, and it clearly has serious effects outside the lungs. The lungs are bad enough, but there are major effects in the blood and elsewhere, and that's what, sneaks up on people, and why some people do well and other people don't is just not understood.
Josh, there are two important stories out updating the vaccine race. The Wall Street Journal stories is wonderful. It's maybe more corporate, where the New York Times story really dives into the genetics of RNA code that they're trying to find. Are you optimistic that we can use the virology of RNA genetics to get us to a faster vaccine?
So it seems quite likely you can get to a faster vaccine through RNA. The question is whether it will prove to be safe and effective, and there's a lot of hope. I don't really have the scientific background, or I don't think anybody really knows, because it hasn't been studied extensively, but we're going to do the studies, and it's really important that they're done well and viewed impartially, and that the standards for this vaccine are the same as the standards for any vaccine. It has to work. It has to be safe. And so, we'll see eventually whether RNA technology is ready for this, and I hope it is.
Josh, this is really important. I have a clear recollection of antibiotics, of the path from penicillin before me to the various permutations, where it took 5 and 10 years to really come up with antibiotics that had a great efficacy against bacteria. In virology and vaccines, is it right that you don't get it the first vaccine, that what we're really talking about is 3 and 4 and 5 iterations of vaccines till we get a quote-unquote cure?
We don't know that. We do know that many different types of technologies are being tried simultaneously, including some very old types of technologies where you're just killing the virus and giving killed virus to people to create an immune response, and then these new RNA viruses, and then there are a whole bunch of things in between. So it could be that more than one of these work well. Hopefully we won't discover that, they wind up making things worse in some way. So that's why we really have to trust the ability of studies to tell us the difference.
Josh, are studies working together? Are virologists working together to get a bigger understanding of exactly what's going on, or is it still each one for themselves?
It's interesting. We have a great number of virologists at Johns Hopkins. One of them, Dr. Pekos, said to me that, pretty much he starts virtually every day talking and conversing with virologists across the world. I think that there is a lot of scientific collaboration going on, not so much inside the specific studies where people have to execute the studies, but as people are really trying to learn about the virus and then interpret the results of the studies. I think that there is, and I think, at the scientific level, people realize that this is humans versus virus, not one country against another.
Joshua Sharfstein of Johns Hopkins University. Paul, we started this series out, and of course this is after talking to Deborah Fuller, who was featured in the Washington Post article, I should say, out at University of Washington in microbiology. But these guys have made me smarter.
They do.
Versus sort of the media uproar.
And what I like is they can put it in language, virology and epidemiology in the language that I can understand, which is a skill in and of itself.
Yeah. What was really captured, folks, the Journal had an article today, and the Washington Post article I put out on Twitter not once but even twice. It was just extraordinary on RNA and the genetic effort. There's different efforts on the vaccines. Is how much time they spend in the labs. I mean, I thought all they did was appear before the media.
Right.
But
they're in their lab coats and they got the microscopes going and all that.
They're working 15, 18-hour days in the labs trying to get this done, and it's grueling work. It's, as he said, it's collegial and competitive at the same time. Right now, we're collegially saying the bid has it versus the ask. Futures are up 40, now up 38. As we're 4 minutes away from the market open. Dow futures up 355. Those levels 3167 and 26112 on the Dow. The VIX comes in sharply, 26.49. Bull market. This is Bloomberg.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
This is a Bloomberg.
Decisions. Clearing. Isn't it great? So much choice. But hey, listening to me on your desktop isn't getting anything done. You need to take this Monday afternoon by the scruff of the neck. Ignore this gloomy weather and carve your path to success, which begins just down the road in Southampton at Solent University. After 3 years here, you don't just get a degree. You get a ton of support, real-world experience and connections, and interview fuel. That's why we're in the top 25 for student satisfaction in the Complete University Guide. At Solent University, we're ready for the future. Apply now at solent.ac.uk/clearing.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
At Halfords, we're here to get you where you want to be. Why not get road ready with a free car check worth £15 at all our stores and garages? With 25,000 weekly slots available at 700 locations, you can count on us to get you safely back on the road. Or even back beside the seaside. From MOTs to tyre fittings, there's no job too big or too small. Halfords, for life's journeys.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning. I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SEI. Today's competitive marketplace requires asset managers to become more operationally adept. See how you can transform your business with SEI's global platform at SEIC.com/IMS. The S&P 500 is higher at the open, up 1.4% or 42 points at 3173. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 1.4% or 380 points to 26,203. And the NASDAQ up 1.5% or 155 points at 10,364. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil's down 1% or 40 cents at $40.25 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1/3% or $6.20 at $17.9620 an ounce. The euro 1.1334 against the dollar. The yen 107.48. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that this morning. With us right now, Ben Emmons with Medley. And it's really good that he's on today because we've had a remarkably Fed-free day. We've been looking at fiscal policy, and, of course, the market's up and up, and Mr. Buffet buying another pipeline or something like that. So to talk to Ben Emmons about the Fed is well-timed. Ben, what's their agenda given the weekend assumption of certain fiscal stimulus? What do? Get out of the way and just try to not be part of the news?
No, I don't think so, Tom. I think that the Federal Reserve will stay really actively involved. And, just seeing the headlines this morning on the Main Street lending program that they're now ready to buy those loans, they're pretty, I think, serious about those programs in particular, where they try to really affect the economy, as opposed to maybe a QE and other tools that are not right now that actively used. It is interesting to note, though, that we are in a market where, as you say, Warren Buffett driving the market up, Asia is seeing a surge and driving a market up, but we're still seeing negative rates priced in, and we're seeing Treasury yields extremely stable, almost reflecting like this idea of...
What does that mean to you? I don't mean to interrupt, but this is just too important an insight. What does the quietude in the bond market mean to you?
So I do think, Tom, that it has to do with the view that we still are in a significant economic contraction that may have risk of potential deflation or period of deflation. I think that's what bond yields are saying, that we may need in the future to address that issue, and tools for that are perhaps yield curve control or negative rates. I'm not saying that the Fed will do that, but it's known that those tools are used for that, right? So I think that's what that is saying, and it's striking against this risk-on rally that's reflecting, optimism about the V-shape becoming perhaps lengthier, right, and better.
So, Ben, where do you think we stand, or where do you think Congress stands, and where do you think the market is discounting as it relates to another round of fiscal stimulus? I hear and I see the $1 trillion number thrown around. Where do you think that market is kind of feeling or thinking about stimulus here?
I think the market feels that it is necessary, it is coming, right, because the cliff that people talk so much about, these unemployment benefits, the insurance of that cliff is, of course, could have impact on near-term consumption. So I think that is a focus. But there's also, I think, concerns about, how the reopening will continue from here. So whatever else type of fiscal stimulus is really needed in the case of further disruption of the reopening. And I think that is still, to be seen, because infrastructure spending may not necessarily be such an effective tool. It may be, again, back towards PPP programs, or that kind of stimulus in order to keep the economy going through this really difficult phase.
It's interesting, Ben. I think the market, as you suggest, is kind of doing this balancing act between what we see on the medical front and the reopening front, and then maybe even the reclosing front versus kind of what we see on the fiscal side, the monetary side here. What do you think is going to drive the day over the next several months? Is it going to be the virus, or is it going to be that backstop put, if you will, from the Fed and from fiscal stimulus?
It it is the interplay between both, because the backstop obviously was a really critical component to the recovery that we've had over the second quarter. So that is, I think, extremely important information for the Fed and other central banks, by the way, to not have that backstop just stop cold turkey, so to speak. Right? So that, I think, will be important. Obviously, the virus is this incredibly unpredictable path. I mean, I was listening to Tom's program earlier about, the vaccine development. There's a lot of hope built around that vaccine, but it's by far not sure if that's actually going to be effective. So the virus will continue to play a big role in the dynamic for market.
Moving on, went up stop on profit for euro. So 1.1315. So stop on profit, I will place to 1.1315.
Developing an asset bubble? I sound like Steve Roach. Ben, what's a bubble? How do you define it? How do you know a bubble when you're looking at a bubble?
I think you can define it in terms of this hope and expectations built around, let's say, particularly the vaccine. I think if you look at vaccine stock valuations, they're through the roof, right? And that's, I think, partly a bubble in the sense that will be only one winner there, or maybe two, right, that truly can deliver the magic potion. The rest may not, and that will be, obviously when the bubble gets really revealed and pops. The other bubble, I think, though, is that we are in a stage of that people really expect this virus to be very short-lived, and it's obviously not, right? So that expectations idea that's built into this V-shaped recovery that we're seeing in credit and equity, that's another component of that.
I tried, Paul, to get through the day without a guest saying V-shape.
Sorry,
I just lost a $10 bet with Pharaoh.
It's the new Brexit. It's the new Brexit. So, Ben, how do you feel about valuations here? I just kind of see the markets movements. We had that, obviously, that in the equity markets that 36 or 37% move down on the initial pandemic. We've recovered a big chunk of that. Yet earnings are coming down for those companies that are even forecasting earnings, and we're certain to have a pretty ugly second quarter earnings coming up here. How do you feel about valuation as you look across some of these asset classes?
Yeah, there's froth there in a variety of areas, really, because of just the price move itself without, indeed, the guidance of earnings. So I think that is one problem still. We're going to have to continue to deal with that probably through entire this year before we can actually make an assessment about, what's the earnings growth really truly look like. Then again, you also have to think about that valuation in, let's say, what they call the stay-at-home or big tech stocks is very high, but that is really what's driving our economy, right? We kept this all together because of technology, so I think the valuation there, it may look stretched, but there's a fundamental reason for that. So, yeah.
I love to bust Ben's chop. Folks, if you're just joining us, Ben Evans with us with Medley here. And it's great because his notes are fabulous. He has a note, Paul. It's not like your research notes, Paul. You put out a 7-page note, and I know if I read the first 2 pages, I got it.
Yep.
Ben puts out a 7-page note, and you go, damn, I gotta read the whole thing. Because it's so smart. It's just amazing the thickness, the way Ben Emmons writes. What's the theory analysis you're doing right now, Ben Emmons? What's the thing that you're thinking hardest about right now?
Well, I'm definitely thinking about the, let's say, what I call the sum of all fears, right? In the sense that we have this fear in the market about different risks that are there that yet have to be really translated. Like, the news this morning, for example, about Trump coming out with a raft of executive orders, including against China. Markets not reacting to this, but there's obviously concerns about this, that this leads to another phase of geopolitical tension. So I definitely want to keep that very much in mind, particularly when it comes to the Hong Kong situation, right, where if there is going to be more sanctions on particular financial institutions, that could lead to some strains in global markets. If you think about dollar funding strains, which we're very familiar with over the last few years, so it could actually return. The other thing, of course, is that we are going to go into the election season, right, and it is notable how people are looking again at these, what they call the Biden basket and the Trump basket and that sort of pricing. Markets are definitely looking at, could there be an incumbent loss here, right? An incumbent president losing the election, and what does this mean for the reopening and the health policy and all those things? that is another consideration I think we have to keep in mind as we rally here with expectations about the economy continue to recover.
Ben Emmons, thank you so much with Medley Global Advisors. This morning, Paul, the market up 323, Dow 26,156. The VIX was a 26 handle. We're stabilized at 27.80 on the VIX. I think on a Fibonacci basis, Paul, I need the market to go up 50% off the bottom before I can start moving out of cash.
Right. You just want that. You want that confirmation bias, that confirmation signal before you get out of the triple all cash fund.
The yield curve, the vanilla 2-10 spread, the difference between the 10-year and the 2-year yield, 53.21 basis points, half a percentage point, call it. That's a little bit steeper, not a breakout, but nevertheless that bears watching. And gold, $17.98 an ounce. $8, almost $1,800 an ounce, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. And we talked to Mike McGlone earlier, Tom, and he feels like it's just this upward bias to gold. He doesn't see a real bear case out there.
With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Paul, thank you very much. Florida health officials say the state has reached a grim milestone. More than 200,000 people have tested positive for coronavirus. Miami Mayor Francis Suarez says the number of new cases in South Florida is growing 3 times faster than that was at the height of the pandemic in the spring.
I think the virus has just become very efficient at spreading. And what has happened is when one person gets it in a household, they come home. By the time they experience symptoms and get tested, everybody in the house is infected. So you go from a 1 person to a 4 or 5 person infection rate almost overnight.
There's pushback over President Trump's claim that 99% of coronavirus cases are harmless. Austin, Texas Mayor Steve Adler.
It's not harmless. There are people that are dying in my community. It's incredibly disruptive. And the messaging coming from the President of the United States is dangerous.
Almost 130,000 people in the U.S. have died from the virus out of almost 2.9 million cases. In New York City, Phase 3 reopening resumes today. Spa and nail salons have opened their doors with precautions. Tennis courts are also open. Indoor dining, however, remains off limits. There is another reason why the Mona Lisa is smiling today. Paris's Louvre Museum, which houses the world's most famous portrait, reopened after a 4-month coronavirus lockdown. Face masks are a must, and visitor numbers will be limited with reservations required. Global news, 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Greatly appreciate that. Paul, what's your observation on these markets? Really extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, Tom. And it just kind of goes to, how it's so different from how the headlines are treated differently now versus March and April when you hear about some negative headlines coming across about the coronavirus now, about Florida and Texas. And, March and April, that would have rocked this market much, much lower. Now people are trying to look to the other side of this and not giving them as much weight as we did back in the early days.
30-year bond, 1.46%, up 3 basis points. 2-year yield, that benchmark, 0.69%. So bonds, just as we've heard from guests, very, very quiet here. All in all, John Farrell's been talking up dollar all day. Let's do that right now. The DXY blended index, 96.59. A breach of 96 would be a big deal. We're not there yet. 107.47 on yen. And Eurodollar stronger, 113.40. From New York, stay with us coast to coast. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Workers trickling back into Manhattan office towers are finding that life isn't the same without a proper meal and someone to share it with. Could be a while before the work lunch is once again a regular ritual in Manhattan. The reopening of indoor dining in New York City has been delayed as coronavirus cases surge in other parts of the U.S., and many large financial firms take a cautious approach to bringing employees back to offices. So what will restaurants look like in the future, and will your favorite even reopen at all? Different countries are experimenting with different measures to adjust to the new normal. In Hong Kong, occupancy restrictions have been relaxed from 50%, but tables still must have partitions or be 1.5 meters or 5 feet apart. Amsterdam has put diners in individual greenhouses. And in the U.S., the most popular models thus far have involved takeout, mail order, and meal kits, as well as side businesses in wine, liquor, and groceries. Visit BloombergPursuits.com for more. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Global news 24 hours a day.
For the friendships, for the fresh air, for the space to grow, for the knowledge, for the sport, for the outdoor education, for the wide horizons, for the academic excellence, for the future. Unleash your child's education at West Buckland School, a co-educational day and boarding school in beautiful North Devon. If you're moving to the southwest for a better quality of life, this is education without compromise, in what the Good Schools Guide called a gem of a school in an exceptional location. To see for yourself, find us at westbuckland.com.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that laptop can help you improve your home setup. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stocks are climbing as a rally in Chinese shares pushed a global equity benchmark toward a one-month high. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. The S&P 500 is up 1.4%, up 43 points to 3173. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 1.5%, or 390 points to 26,222. And the Nasdaq up 1.6%, or 161 points at 10,369. 10-year Treasury down 8/30 seconds, yield 0.69%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil down 0.6%, or 24 cents at $40.42 a barrel. COMEX gold up 0.5%, or $8.70 at $17.9870 an ounce. The euro 1.1344 against the dollar. The yen at 107.50. We continue to watch shares of Uber Technologies up 4.5% after the company agreed to buy Postmates in a $2.65 billion all-stock deal. Tesla shares up about 7% as JMP Securities lifted the electric car maker's price target by 43%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. In legal journalism, he is at the top of the heap. Gregory Storr works for Bloomberg News, and he is definitive on slicing Supreme Court decisions. Here's the rules. I spoke to his people talked to my people, and the agreement is we get them for 3 minutes, 58 seconds here before 10 a.m., when maybe you do, maybe you don't get Supreme Court opinions. And the one we want to talk about, Greg Storr, is, of course, the visibility of President Trump's personal tax returns. If he loses this case today or tomorrow, whatever it is, does Tom Keene get to see President Trump's 48-page tax return?
First of all, Tom, you're absolutely killing me. I'm going to tell my people to tell your people not to do that in the future. So there are two tax return two financial records cases. One involves Congress. One involves a New York State grand jury. If the House Democrats win the congressional case, there is a very, very good chance you, Tom Keene, will see his tax returns because there's nothing that keeps Congress from releasing them to the public once they have them. The other case also has really important implications for the power of the presidency and whether or not he's above the law, but it's the House case that will determine whether or not the records become public before the election.
So, Greg, is there any kind of precedence here that you and other Supreme Court watchers are kind of falling back on?
Not really, because this case is in some ways one of a kind. So if we're talking about the New York case, we start to talk about things like the Nixon tapes case and the Clinton case where the court allowed a private civil suit to go forward against the president. The congressional case has fewer direct precedents like that. It is really a test of Congress's power as much as it is of the president's power. Congress says we want these records because we're pursuing legislation, and the court has never had to decide whether Congress can do that when it means getting copies of the president's personal records while he's in office.
So the case of the taxes, I mean, it's an original case. Is that what you're saying? I mean, go back to John Marshall and the great issues of states' rights versus federal rights and all the other legal mumbo-jumbo. This is an original case, or is it within the body of law that these judges will look at?
Oh, it's within the body of law. I was merely trying to suggest that this kind of fact pattern where Congress is trying to get records that may implicate the president in doing something wrong. It's a case where the court is going to be able to really determine what it thinks is the right answer. It won't necessarily feel like it's bound by a particular precedent.
Do you assume it's a political case where it's conservative-liberal split on the president's taxes?
I would expect we will see at least some of that dynamic, whether it ends up being 5-4 with John Roberts, casting the deciding vote. I'm not sure I'm ready to say that, but I would be surprised if we didn't see at least the most conservative justices on one side and the most liberal justices on the other.
Greg, your people called while you were answering the question. That's it. Greg Storr, our legal jewel, with us today. And this, of course, 8 minutes away from his important coverage, if we see those decisions today. I love, Paul, the idea that the Supreme Court's like the 19th century. We don't even know, like when the decisions come and there's no cameras and...
No, the decisions come when they want to issue them, and that's kind of how it's been. And but we kind of what's rare, Tom, is they're now into the month of July, so that's rare for the Supreme Court. Typically, most of the rulings come out in the month of June, so they've got a lot on their plate that they have to deal with. So they're putting a little.
It's such a busy Monday, Paul, that I don't think we spent enough time on Mr. Buffett's $9.7 billion transaction. I'm of the feeling, and I hate to. I'm not editorializing, I'm just observing that CFOs are like lemmings, and when it starts, it starts. Do you suggest that this is a jump start for private equity to go? The CFO of any private equity shop walks into the partners and says, let's go, game on?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people follow Warren Buffett that way, principally, Tom, because his arguably one of his greatest strengths and his historical, strengths in his deal making has been value. Really spotting value, whether it's a Goldman Sachs in the financial crisis or whether it's natural gas at an all-time low, as Mike McGlone was just saying. He spots value, and that might be a catalyst here, not just for today's market, Tom, but I think maybe, as you suggest, maybe for some folks to go out there look for some asset value.
If this transaction is $4 billion. Up front, $5.7 billion assumed debt. Okay, the assumed debt is fine, and they refi that, and they play with it, and that's what keeps people in finance employed. But the $4 billion, it's almost like funny money to these guys, right? And I don't mean just Mr. Buffett, but I mean Cerberus and Commerce Bank and money doesn't cost anything now, right?
It doesn't, Tom. I mean, you look at some of the rates, the 10 years as we point out all the time, but I'm just looking at the balance sheet for Berkshire Hathaway, $350 billion of cash.
So they use, I can do that math. They use 1% of their cash.
They're literally not going to miss it.
Can I say, is that accurate? They use 1.3% of their cash.
Sure. Yep.
So they have 98% of their cash left over.
That's why, when you read, about Warren Buffett right now, that's the challenge if you're an investor at Berkshire Hathaway. Where can you actually deploy that capital?
Well, yeah, but there's got to be a frenzy. I mean, come on, Paul. It's got to be, at some point, everybody's up to their eyeballs in cash in that world. At some point, it's got to be like a frenzy, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And that includes private equity, Tom, as you were pointing out. Those guys are sitting on they've been raising capital for the last 5, 6, 7 years.
It's a dumb question, folks. My last question of the day. Paul Sweeney, isn't Mr. Buffett really private equity, even though it's public?
Yeah, it sure feels like that way. And he's the first phone call that, a lot of CEOs and CFOs make when they need some liquidity.
I learned something. You learned something from Paul Sweeney. Those of you with a Bloomberg terminal, check out Bloomberg Intelligence. It's just really, BRC Go is just amazing. The Dow up 436 points. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers. And to you that rock that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Come on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
Nothing phases the money calm bull because his bills are under control with Money Supermarket. Even this. The dentist, not a flicker of anxiety. Fox is making love. This laugh. He's calmer than a banana. So, be like the money calm bull. Get money calm. Money Supermarket.
Where do sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia collide? On their podcast, Knuckleheads, NBA veterans Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles sit down with athletes, musicians, and entertainers to get brutally honest, totally unguarded conversations about everything from current events to untold stories from the golden era of sports.
Neil. You know that, right? I tried to tip dunk all the free throw line one time.
Search Knuckleheads on TuneIn to listen.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races.
Wanna bet football can make you feel nostalgic?
Playing days are over, so...
On the podcast, NFL Alumni Lounge, Charlie Booth sits down with retired NFL legends to talk about their careers, life after football, and everything in between.
Mr. Darren Waller, good to have you.
Yes, sir, it's good to be here.
Dana White, welcome to the Alumni Lounge.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Big member of our NFL alumni family, the CEO of the XFL, Mr. Oliver Luck.
Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for having me.
We're here with the president, Mr. Eric Price. Good to see you.
Search NFL Alumni Lounge on TuneIn to listen.
First, we're told that masks don't work. Then, we're told to wear them all the time. One week, we hear that the mortality rate is 2%. The next, well, who knows? In the time of COVID-19, there is so much uncertainty, and so much scientists are learning in real time, along with the rest of the world. So it's hard to know what you can be sure of and what's still a big question mark. Podcast 19 from 538, where we'll explore the evidence behind the science in our fight against coronavirus. I'm science journalist Anna Rothschild, Each week, I'll investigate coronavirus mysteries, keep track of the latest developments on vaccines and treatments. Oh, and I'll try to edit out all the times I shush my family since I'm recording this thing from the chaos of my home.
Search Podcast 19 to listen today.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney.
How do you kind of view the volatility in the marketplace here?
The harshest downturn for American workers in history.
Companies across the board, across industries, really trying to shore up their balance sheets.
There's very, very disturbing dynamics at work.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
There's only so much that you can speed up vaccine development. Because of all the dislocations, there's always relative value trades that you could be doing.
This could be a U-shaped recession rather than a V-shaped recession.
It's the uncertainty, I think, that is really spooking everyone.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good Monday morning from New York City and points beyond to our worldwide audience. Coming up, we're going to talk energy. It's good enough for Warren Buffett to get into the energy business. We're going to talk to Stephen Schork, president of Schork Group, to get his thoughts on all things oil and nat gas. Plus, a fascinating discussion with Michael Sonnenfeld. He's chairman of Tiger 21, and we're going to talk about how their ultra-wealthy and entrepreneurial members are navigating the coronavirus to preserve wealth. But right now, let's go to John Tucker of Bloomberg News, get a Bloomberg Business Flash. John, what do you have for us?
Yeah, Paul, green on the screen. It is a risk-on rally today. This Bloomberg Business Flash this morning being brought to you by Witham, a forward-thinking advisory and accounting firm helping clients to be in a position of strength in the new reality of business. Learn about their innovative solutions by visiting Witham.com. Automakers and bank shares, they're jumping as the S&P 500 heads toward its fifth straight increase. Uber, their shares are surging after the company agreed to buy Postmates. That's a deal worth $2.65 billion, all stock. Global stock markets, they started the week in an upbeat mood after a front-page editorial in China's Securities Times that said that fostering a healthy bull market after the pandemic is now more important to the economy than ever. Michael Hewson at CMC Markets, an analyst there, says several things will push equity markets even higher from here. And this is what he had to say earlier.
The prospect that we could get another US fiscal stimulus as well, particularly given that we are seeing these rises in coronavirus cases, I think it's probably more or less inevitable that we'll get one. And ultimately, the economic data is continuing to improve. So you've got two factors, I think, helping.
And the Dow Jones Industrial Average right now up 437 points. That's a rise of 1.7%. We're at 26,259. The S&P 500 up 50 points, a rise of 1.6% at 3179. The Nasdaq Composite Index 196 points higher. That's up 1.9%. We're at 10,404. 10-year yield in the U.S. 0.70%. And if you're keeping score, since the March low, S&P 500 is now up 42%. It's actually down 6% from the February 19th high. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. Bloomberg Markets continues with Paul Sweeney and Bonnie Quinn.
Nail salons, tattoo parlors and dog runs. That's what's reopened in Phase 3 in New York City. Well, that's the good part of reopening the economy, perhaps, but there are other things going on as well. For example, Warren Buffett getting into a little deal-making. Let's get to Dave Wilson and see what's happening in the markets. Dave?
Yeah, a bit of deal-making. I mean, they've had an energy business for some time now. They're expanding it by buying some natural gas assets from the folks at Dominion Energy. Berkshire Hathaway's Class B shares, which are in the S&P 500, up 2.5% in response to that deal. Dominion, though, taking a bit of a hit, not just because of the sale, also because the Atlantic Coast gas pipeline, which had been opposed by environmentalists and others, it was going to run through the Appalachian Trail, which didn't go over so well. Well, it's been scrapped now, and so you've got Dominion shares down 5.8%. Biggest drop in the S&P 500. Duke Energy, which also planned to have a role in the pipeline, down 0.7%. But there aren't a whole lot of other stocks besides those two that are lower in the S&P 500 right now. Just 30 stocks down. You look across the 11 main industry groups in the index, they're all higher. Financial stocks leading the way. Within the financial group, insurers kind of standing out. You're seeing higher bond yields, lower prices today, and so that's a plus for the insurers in terms of their ability to generate interest income potentially. And we're talking about companies like Lincoln National, Principal Financial, Prudential Financial, Unum Group, all up more than 4% in early trading.
So, Dave, just looking at, the market here as you do on a daily basis, I'm looking at the VIX here, the volatility index. We're down below 28 here. It seems like the VIX is coming down as the market, I guess, rallies up, but it still feels like the fear factor out there is pretty high.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when you consider that, you go back over the history of the VIX, which is about 30 years, you see an average something like 18, 19. It just shows you how persistent the concern about future volatility has been. Because bear in mind, the VIX is based on the prices paid for S&P 500 options. And so if you're concerned about the potential for a market swing, you're more likely to buy the option, be willing to pay more to get it. So, that is certainly has been reflected in the VIX, really going all the way back to February when we saw stocks coming off their highs. And, you just haven't seen this index, come back to what would be considered, historical norms. So, looking forward, I mean, you have to kind of figure that people are at least concerned that you could get a potential for future stock swings here.
We definitely got a little leg higher after we got the ISM non-manufacturing index of services back up to 57.1, well better than the 50.2 reading that was anticipated for June. And we also had the market US services and composite PMIs out a little bit earlier, 47.9 for both, so, in contraction territory, but still higher than expected. Dave, how much are economic fundamentals impacting this stock market?
Well, I mean, they're important to the extent that they perhaps kind of lay the groundwork for what companies are going to be saying about earnings. We're about a week away from really starting to see those quarterly results pile up, pile in, pile up, call it what you will. Once we get some of the biggest banks, we'll really be focusing on the earnings. But even on that front, I mean, you're getting some positives today. Thermo Fisher Scientific, one example there. They gave some preliminary second quarter results that were better than analysts were looking for, and so you're seeing that stock move up 3.4% at the moment. Freeport-McMoRan, biggest gain in the S&P 500 right now, up 7%. They're talking about selling more copper and gold than people were looking for, and while they're still anticipating that they end up with a second quarter loss, it's not as bad as what analysts were anticipating. So that, bit of an update in terms of their performance going over well. And you have to wonder, I mean, given, analysts looking for a 44% drop in profit in the second quarter from the S&P 500 as a group, you get enough of these positives, and maybe the economic data kind of gives you a backdrop where you can understand where they're coming from.
Dave, one of the phenomena we saw in the last quarter was so many companies withdrawing their guidance for the remainder of 2020. Is there an expectation that we're going to see more of that this quarter, or maybe we'll see some companies maybe dipping their toes saying, here's what we think's going to happen?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, because I haven't gotten a clear sense from what strategists are saying, whether they're expecting much to shift in that regard. I mean, one thing you can say, though, to the extent that companies were willing to give some indication of what their performance was looking like, I mean, you were getting more positives than negatives, and that was unusual based on our data going back 20 years. So, that's, again, another sign that, maybe things won't be quite as terrible as analysts are anticipating. And, you do tend to get that anyway, but, given the magnitude of the decline they're seeing this quarter, maybe the positives provide a bit more reassurance than they ordinarily would.
All right, Dave Wilson, thank you. That is at the One Dave on Twitter, or NI Wilson on your Bloomberg.
Okay, position closed on euro, £2,500 profit. Yeah, from 112.90 to 113.15. All right, okay, £2,500 profit.
So that's an interesting sort of turn of events that you might have anticipated seeing. Dominion Energy down almost 6% on the Buffett deal. Duke Energy and Hess Corporation, plenty of energy companies lower today. Marathon Oil down 0.8% as well. But in the main, stocks are higher. Now let's get some world and national headlines, and we'll go to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. and Nathan Hager.
Bonnie, close to 11.5 million people around the world have caught the novel coronavirus. The U.S. Sunbelt continues to be a hot spot with cases surging from California to Florida. Austin Mayor Steve Adler says there is a lesson to be learned in Texas.
We opened up in ways that were not sustainable, and now we're having to turn that curve, or else we're looking at our hospitals being overwhelmed here in the next 10 days to 2 weeks.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows says cases are rising because testing is increasing. He is also rejecting calls for a nationwide mask mandate.
A national mandate is not in order. We're allowing our governors and our local mayors to weigh in on that.
Meadows spoke on Fox News. White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany, also appearing on the network, says the president is aware of virus spikes and is, quote, on it. President Trump is suggesting NASCAR's only black driver apologize after a rope fashioned into a noose was found in his garage in Talladega. In a tweet this morning, the president suggested the discovery was a hoax and suggested that and the racing circuit's decision to ban the Confederate flag is hurting its ratings. A federal court has ordered the Dakota Access Pipeline to shut down within a month by August 5th. The U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia says a crucial permit for the Army Corps of Engineers falls short of Environmental Policy Act requirements. American Indian tribes have been fighting the pipeline in court for 4 years, and the Supreme Court has just upheld and broadened a ban on robocalls to cell phones. As part of the decision, the justices tossed out an exception for calls made to collect debt owed to the federal government. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
How long will it take for the economy to recover?
How many of them have remained on the job throughout this?
People are not going to be in public transportation.
Nobody knows.
You have received £600 million from the UK.
But we can promise the most complete information and the most detailed analysis.
The question is, what kind of recovery will it be?
Through every twist and turn.
Would you be wary of investment in China at this point?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
To buy your home, you became a house hunting ace, learned about loans, scoured neighborhoods, and asked the right questions. Now you're queen of your castle. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll feel empowered to own your retirement like you own your home. Go to aceyourretirement.org. Because when it comes to clearing financial hurdles, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Economics.
All this doom and gloom was out there.
Finance.
Do you see this as a technical correction?
Investment.
What are you looking at to give you some sort of compass through this period?
The Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast.
Lots and lots of talk about what the Fed should and shouldn't do.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and the names that shape the world's markets.
We speak with Professor Schiller of Yale University.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Listen today at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industry.
Hey, I'm Robin, one of the tech experts here to help you at Curry's PC World. I'm not just a voice on the radio. You can now come into your local store and talk tech with a human being like me. Just the news you needed this afternoon. We've put all the right measures in place to help you again safely in your local Staples Corner store. The tech experts are back in town. So come in and see if that laptop can help you improve your home setup. And welcome back to your local Curry's PC World.
Here's to you that learned with homeschooling that your kids are smarter than you. Here's to all the self-taught banana bread bakers And to you that rocked that very questionable homemade haircut. Costa is giving £3 to everyone that missed us as much as we missed you. Get your £3 in the Costa app today and enjoy a coffee, cake, or snack on us. Go on, you earned it. Terms and conditions apply. For details, visit costa.co.uk/terms.
When you're facing a problem, like how to make an electric car more efficient, you could sit down and talk it through. But at Honda, we decided to listen to the wind tunnel. With wing mirrors? Or without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
With?
No.
Without?
Yes.
Or with cameras instead of wing mirrors?
Sweet.
The new Honda E with wing cameras, not mirrors, because we listen to the wind. Honda, the power of dreams.
In line with government guidelines, face coverings are now compulsory on public transport. At Asda, you can get a 4-pack of Prima disposable face coverings for £2.80, or a 2-pack of washable face coverings from £2.50. Asda, we're all in this together. Selected stores subject to availability.
London. Toolstation are here to help get your job safely started and finished, with over 60 branches within the M25. All open with social distancing and contactless click and collect from 5 minutes. And with 20,000 top trade quality products to choose from. Order online now for collection in London branches and get £5 off when you spend over £30 with the code LON530. So, get your job started at toolstation.com. Terms and conditions apply.
At Simply Be, we've stepped up our sales so that you can step out in style. With up to 80% off summer clothing, you'll find some seriously must-have fashion at prices that are simply too good to miss. So go on, skip those weekend queues and treat yourself to something gorgeous. Shop the sale at simplybe.co.uk.
Get ready for the University of Bedfordshire. We've got all you need to make ambition become reality, to make lifelong friendships, to make contacts in your chosen industry, to make a name for yourself, to make it. In fact, we've got everything except your application. So get it in, sit back and relax. Wait, actually, check out our generous scholarships and bursaries for support at every step at beds.ac.uk. Okay, now you can relax.
You always say the best thing you ever did was join up. I bet you don't get the same experiences in Civvy Street. Remember those amazing deployments we had? And that feeling of pride. We'd love to have you back. Go on. Feel the pride again. Search RAF Rejoin Us.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm John Tucker in the Bloomberg Newsroom with this Bloomberg Business Flash. It has been brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network, delivering the support you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. Right now, we're seeing risk-on rally. S&P 500 headed toward its 5th straight increase. Also, the NASDAQ Composite Index, that is at a record. You have the high-flying tech names like Amazon and Tesla among the best performers right now. Also, Uber Technologies, that is surging after the company agreed to buy Postmates. That's an all-stock deal worth $2.65 billion. The stocks Europe 600 index overseas climbing more than 1%, while developing nation stocks, they headed more than 2%. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 342 points. That's a rise of 1.3%. We're at 26,161. S&P 500, 42 points higher. That's up 1.4% at 3172. The NASDAQ Composite Index is up 190 points, up 1.8%. We're at 10,395, a record there. 10-year yield in the U.S. is 0.7%. And we have Brent crude right now up 23 cents a barrel. NYMEX crude down 12 cents right now, $40.52 a barrel. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Bonnie Quinn and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
I just want to mention one more Supreme Court decision that came out this morning. The Supreme Court Deciding on faceless electors, essentially people who cast votes for president in the Electoral College for somebody other than the winner of their state's popular vote, hasn't happened all that often until 2016, at which time 10 electors voted or tried to vote for somebody other than Trump or Hillary Clinton. So the court has now rejected contentions that the Constitution gives presidential electors the right to vote as they please, no matter who won the state's popular vote. That means that from now on, electoral college voters are really hands bound. They have to vote as their party votes. Samuel Alito said giving electors free rein could produce chaos in a close presidential election. Now let's move to the oil market, because we're seeing Saudi Arabia raise prices, we're seeing equities rally, and that's all helping oil to stay above $40 a barrel. Somebody watching this and the natural gas markets very closely is Stephen Shork, president of the Shork Group. Always thrilled to have Stephen on. Stephen, Saudi is raising prices. Is that a little bit dangerous in terms of the balance when it comes to OPEC?
Absolutely, I think so, Vani. Look, it is the first week of July, which only means we have about 7 more weeks of demand or peak demand left in the season. And in fact, when we look at this market historically, demand will peak by the end of this month, beginning of August. So once we get into August, this season's peak demand is going to pull off into the exit ramp. And then as, of course, we transition into the fall, demand will continue to fall. Now, keep in mind, this is not obviously a normal year, and demand is already supremely lagging relative to normal. For instance, here in the United States, we should be boiling upwards of well over 17 million barrels a day. In last week's EIA report, we just breached the 14 million barrel a day. So we're accumulating relative to historical norms a significant glut in the market with regard to crude oil, the same situation in gasoline. So with the current situation, given where we are at this point of the calendar, we're certainly playing with a dangerous market at this point.
So, Stephen, the news we woke to this morning is that Warren Buffett is buying some assets from Dominion Resources, the pipeline business. Is that should that in any way be interpreted as a call that Warren's calling the bottom in natural gas prices?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm certainly relieved that Mr. Buffett is making this purchase. Of course, with what we saw last week with Chesapeake and some of the other major bankruptcies we've seen since the market collapsed back in April, certainly the signs were there that we were going to see consolidation in this industry. I don't think Mr. Buffett's purchase is going to be the last transaction that we see in this market. We're going to see a marketplace that is much smaller, as companies with good acreage, prime assets that are having difficulty will look to bail on this market. So clearly, what we're looking at here is a market that, primarily natural gas as that fuel of the future, certainly giving its stance in the marketplace. That is the thinking man's choice to be had as we look forward. My only caveat here is, or my concern, I should say, is kind of the lurch that we're seeing with certain aspects in the government going away or discouraging investment in hydrocarbons, especially natural gas. But Mr. Buffett's entry into this market at this juncture, it makes sense. These assets are being had on the cheap. Obviously, he's Warren Buffett. He knows what he's doing. And I'm taking it as a relief, because my concerns regarding government interference in this market aside, I don't think he'd be making this assumption if that was really something to be concerned about.
It goes against tuition, Stephen, not that we should really ever use tuition on anything, particularly when it comes to the markets, but natural gas producers for the 36th consecutive month have boosted production at these prices. How does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a bit of a head scratcher. A lot of that production, Vani, over, as you said, over the past 3 years, has been what's called associated gas production. So that is gas making its way to the market that's not being drilled for. That is to say, this was crude oil that's being drilled for, and gas deposits associated with those barrels being pulled out of the ground. That gas is coming up as well, and that is certainly adding to the pool So I do think we're at that point. For instance, here in Pennsylvania, which is now the epicenter of basically the global natural gas market, we've seen a significant decline in drilling permits since February. So, and in fact, Appalachian natural gas production, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia specifically, that production has been falling month over month now for about the last 7 or 8 months. So it's been a slow catch-up. I think, Vonnie, that the issue here is that the gas market is, there's a limit engineering-wise to the amount of gas you can actually pull off, but now it's a demand side.
Hey, Stephen, thanks so much, as always, for that update on all things energy. We always appreciate getting your views. Stephen Schork, president of the Schork Group in Pennsylvania, talking about crude oil globally, natural gas, particularly here in the U.S. Again, Warren Buffett buying the pipeline or certain pipeline assets from Dominion Energy. Some people viewing that as a somewhat of a call on the bottom for natural gas in this country, in addition to buying just those hard pipeline assets. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are on the rise after a strong session in Asia, the Dow gaining more than 350 points. Investors are weighing up the potential for ongoing monetary policy support. Earnings season on the horizon, and the fate of the stock rally will hinge on numbers that no one knows how to predict. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg